Happy Sunday, everybody.
Happy Sunday.
How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. It's been a busy weekend,
Oh, okay.
but it slowed down, you know, 3 hours ago, so that was enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was about to ask, have you, you know, rested up since Easter, but I guess work never
yeah.
ends, right?
It was one of, sometimes you just have weekends like this. So it was a wedding at 11 on Saturday, and then at 2:30, I had to get a couple of our kids caught up on baptism
Uh-huh.
for their confirmation mass with the bishop at 4:30. Uh,
Hmm.
but because we've got so many kids and such a small worship space right now, because we're not in our main church yet, um,
Right.
we had to have two confirmation masses. And so the one on Saturday had the bishop, and the one this afternoon had just Father Phil. He got faculties to do the confirmation.
Okay.
So, yeah. So that meant I've got all three of those yesterday that I had to take care of, and then the two masses this morning, and I was the MC for the confirmation mass this afternoon. And these confirmation masses, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of little things to take care of. It's just a lot of walking.
A lot of walking.
Walking.
For mass?
Well, before mass, when you're running around setting things up.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Well, that's what altar servers are for, right?
I don't have any like high school aged altar servers that I would trust with more complicated tasks.
Ah, okay. Right.
So our oldest altar server was a sixth grader, which, we can put him to use, but they're not going to be quite as, I don't know. It was a team effort and I had a part
Okay.
and, and now it's done and I can relax.
Nice. Good to hear.
Philotimo Christos Anesti. Same deal. Mark tells me that busy is good and it keeps me out of trouble. Yes.
Right.
Philotimo went to a confirmation mass for my friend last summer. Joyous occasion. Indeed, indeed, it is joyous. But one thing that I like to do whenever we've got a big mass with a crowd of people who are not ordinarily there is delegate somebody to go up half an hour before mass starts and pray the rosary. So
Mm-hmm.
the church area is at least somewhat reflective and prayerful.
Right.
'Cause there's a fair number of people who don't come to church often, even though they'll bring their kids for confirmation.
Yeah, that does
A little
happen.
bit of a little bit of this, the old chit chat. So anyway, we make them pray the rosary.
Was that today?
The confirmation mass.
Oh no. No, there was something else going on today at our church. It was something to do with confirmation, but it wasn't confirmation. I thought maybe you guys did the same thing.
I'm not sure what you would have going on for confirmation. That's not confirmation. I'll be interested
Yeah.
to hear what this is after you've done some more research and can give me a clearer idea of what we're talking about.
Yeah, they told us, but I forgot what they said.
Was it like a rite of sending, and they were
Uh,
like sending them off to the cathedral for
n
confirmation?
no, I think I heard somebody said catechesis, so it might have been people from RCIA that were there, but not for confirmation for some reason. But then again, we just did confirmation at Easter, so I don't remember. But something was
Okay,
going on today.
as
And we
long as
had
the priest,
somebody, what's that?
I said, as long as the priest knows what's going on,
Oh
you
yeah,
can
I
make a lot of
don't
things
have to
work.
know. I'm not running the parish, so uh but yeah, there was somebody who was doing sign language for the mass, which I thought was interesting because I've never seen that before. So I figured something special was going on.
Yeah, all that signing looks like a lot of work, a lot of energy getting in it. You got to put your
Oh
face
yeah.
into it too. I've seen some of those big signed masses where they actually tag team in and out. Like every 15 minutes, somebody will switch in, so they're not getting worn out. I guess.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. I mean, it doesn't look like too much effort, moving your arms around, but I'm sure for an hour, that's kind of a lot.
But it's not just the physical effort of moving your arms, although that's certainly a part of it. But you're also translating into sign language, which has its own grammar.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not just English on your hands. So
right.
so yeah,
Have you ever had that at any of your masses?
not in my area, but I've seen it. Like when I lived in Montana, one of our masses at the parish was always signed. I guess they had people who volunteered to do that, and I've seen it at a few other time places. So it kind of depends. Like usually, in your area, there's like one parish that has the one signed mass, and there's not so many deaf people in there that every parish needs to have it for every mass.
Right.
Yeah,
Hmm. Ah, interesting. Yeah, it's just something I've never seen at a mass before, so it caught my eye.
yeah. Well, what else has caught your eye? What have you been up to?
What I have been up to, well, uh, mostly right now, it's just designing our final projects. Uh, I have a video to make as well as my other two design projects, so it'll be a busy couple of weeks until the end of the semester. But the main thing is our studio project, which we're doing right now. We're doing the same exact site and almost the same program as the second years. So we're all kind of doing the same thing, but
Hmm.
what they're doing is a little more detailed, and it's all for a competition that they're entering into. And they're also in teams of two, which is pretty interesting. I don't think we go. I don't think we do any of these projects in teams of two until the end of our second year. So, although we do a lot of other partner projects, which are the other ones I'm doing right now, but this one is a competition for them. For us, it's our last design project, and it's of a place elsewhere in New Jersey. It's a place where a Catholic charity called Straight and Narrow. I believe they're a charity. Basically, it's a building where I believe there's people there who will help others for free to get out of stuff like addictions and other problems that you know people who are homeless or addicted to stuff and this sort of thing. They'll help out where other people can't seem to help them out. So it's kind of like one of the last lines of help that these people can get.
Hmm.
So this charity has acquired some more land on this street corner because the other buildings around them went to disrepair and were demolished. So now they're able to build stuff there. And the program is we have to design a building that will enable conversation. So it says because of uh, division and politics and other topics that go through our communities today, what they want is a space that will enable all sorts of people in the community to come and work out their differences and have a deeper connection in their community.
You need to put a boxing ring in there.
Yeah, pretty much. A verbal boxing ring, perhaps.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, but and then we're required to put certain things in there, like a gallery space, a presentation room, a courtyard, and they have to be roughly a certain amount of square footage. And there's like some raised ground for a parking lot that we can't change, that we have to figure out how to put that into the site. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it seems like you're operating with a decent number of constraints on
yeah,
this project,
oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
which should hopefully pull out a little bit of creativity from you, so you don't have to sit there and try and reinvent something. The the constraints will guide you.
Yeah, exactly. It's helpful because if you can do anything, then you can do anything, and then what do you do? So it's helpful
Right.
to have those constraints to do something. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I thought it was funny just the prompt talking about enabling discussion and it just sounded like estuary and that sort of thing. So
That's what you need is to have in the center is a statue of PVK. No,
yeah,
not PVK, just a giant PVK head.
bust. And then on the front, engraved in letters, is conversation.
Conversation. Hey, you're in New Jersey. That's home territory right there.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, actually, wait, what town is he from? Actually,
Oh,
is it
God.
Patterson, New Jersey?
Yeah, Patterson.
That's where it is.
There's way too many things coming together for there not to be. Like I'm not saying you should actually do that because that would be a foolish thing to do for the lulz. But if you can't get some kind of subtle little PVK thing in there,
Oh, what else could I put in that's not
we just got
his
to get the
face?
guys put in some PVK bingo stuff into the chat so we can sort through this. We got to take advantage of the distributed cognition that we've got here. Um,
I
something
could
about the
also,
Dominican Republic, something about being
yeah,
a Calvinist.
I could also, there's since there's gallery space, I could do like example paintings in the gallery space and then put his face on one of them or something.
And then like some shots of living stones
Yeah.
and him putting John Vervaeke into a headlock or something. Have an
Oh
AI
man.
generate that.
Yeah, that could probably work.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
man.
That's probably the right go for that. Something subtle, not at the center of the design.
Right, right.
The straight and narrow center in Patterson, New Jersey. Now, is this just something that your professors looked at in the state and said, "Hey, this would make a good project," or are they actually like talking to the people running this place and like kind of have a pseudo contract?
So I don't know if this is an actual design that the people there would take for something. Um, but it's the program was created by the people hosting the competition, which is not our professors. It's somewhere
Oh,
else. I'm not exactly sure where, but I imagine since it's in New Jersey, maybe it's like a statewide thing. So, but I don't know if it's like let's do a competition and whoever wins will do that as the design or something. So I would be interested to know that, but for
and
us, well, what's that?
yeah, then they can get free ideas from their competition because they're just having
Yeah,
students do it
exactly.
for credit
Yeah, exactly.
and for clout too. Don't forget about the clout. So
Oh, of course. Yeah, put it on your
put it
resume
on
or
your put
portfolio
it
or something.
your Instagram or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
However,
your Instagram.
however architects get attention.
Uh, I guess social media, Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing. I don't
Just
actually
take a
have any
picture
of
of it.
those, but
I designed this. Check it out, everybody.
yeah, that's probably pretty cool. You know, you design a building, and then you drive by like, hey, I drew that on a piece of paper.
probably be more like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made the windows so small.
It could be like that, yeah.
Or the stupid contractors didn't get the bricks looking right. This is not what I had in mind.
Oh, they did the tooling wrong on the mortar. Oh, can't believe it.
Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Oh,
Happy Sunday.
It is Sunday. I will acquiesce to the Sunday part. Yes.
Okay. You're in a good mood tonight, I can see. That means we're gonna have some calm and recollected reflections.
Demons.
Or
Demons
or
all around.
demons all around. Alrighty. Do you need me to put my stole on and do some exercise? I got the exercised salt right here. We can make this happen.
Let's do it. Sally Joe was joking at, all the problems. I've been trying to set up this computer for a while on and off. And, all kinds of things happened. And then last night I set it up and I turned the thing on and flames, literal yellow flames start coming out. And
oh,
then I'm like, all right, whatever. And I shut it off immediately and whatever. And then earlier today, I was like, I gotta find where what's causing the burning, right? Can't find it. Nothing is burned. And I'm like, what's going on?
Oh,
I don't
geez, I'm gonna have to
understand.
make another trip down south to sprinkle a little holy water.
A little, you better bring gallons. So
That's
I
usually not very good for electronics. Like, I'm not an expert on this. You're the
that's
expert, but
it's fine. It'll be fine. And I just want the demons gone. If I don't have electronics, I'm fine. Get rid of the demons. Priorities, Father Eric. Priorities. No more Twitter. I don't care. It's like fine. It's a good trade. So I took the motherboard out, put it in another machine, get everything, whatever, swapped everything around. I got parts everywhere. The back room is just a complete like junkyard of computer parts. Like wow, there's cases and motherboards and screws and all kinds of
broken
paraphernalia.
stick of RAM on the floor.
No RAM. The RAM's contained. Well,
Okay.
not in the shed, but in the back room, there's no RAM. That's about the only saving grace there. And then I was like, well, I should grab the hard drive out of the other machine and just use that one because I've already designated it for use for this project. And it's easier than finding another hard drive. I go to take the hard drive out. The hard drive was what was burning.
Mm.
Never in a billion years. I've never heard of a hard drive actually setting
Solid
itself on
state or
fire.
disk?
Never seen one. I mean, I've heard rumors that these things happen, but I've never been around it before. I was like, well, that's a first, and and it just and the thing is, that's not, that either has to be caused by dust or a bug. It couldn't be dust because I cleaned it before I put it in. A bug or a defect or demons because hard drives are not that high power. There's not a lot to burn, and it's all traces. It's not like you could have a chuffed wire on a hard drive. There aren't any wires. It's a board. So the board itself actually like set on fire, and I was like, okay. But that's good news
wow.
because that means the motherboard and the chip and the wiring in the other case are fine. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I'm not going to blow anything up by using any of those components. Of course, I've taken the motherboard out and put it in the other machine. It's like, so yeah.
Wow. So was it a solid state drive or a disk drive?
No, it was a 2.5-inch spinny disk. It was an old laptop high speed drive.
Huh.
Yeah, very strange. Very
I'm having a
unusual.
hard time imagining that burning. Is like silicon? Like how hot do you have to get silicon before it'll burn?
Well, it looked to me like what had happened was there are copper connectors on the board, and then the boards are green usually, right? And then that's the coating. There's a coating on top of that. There's a clear coating on top of the green coating. That's what it burned, was some of the copper connectors underneath the board or something. And I was just like, what? Like, no, that was very strange.
Interesting. All righty, we got a question. Did Mark watch that video Byrne recommended to Paul this week? My first exposure to Malachi Martin, he was talking to William Buckley. That's old school right there. I don't think
Buckley,
William
yeah.
Buckley was on TV when I was born.
Don't think so.
No.
Yeah. No, I didn't know about what Byrne recommended to Paul off the top of my head. I gotta watch the Nick Cave stuff. Because Byrne very nicely on Twitter said, no, here's the videos you gotta watch for Nick Cave in order from his punk rock days to his everything's demons days or whatever. It seems to be quite enlightened in the last video I saw of him. I was like, this guy was a punk rocker, huh? That's pretty weird.
Now, this Malachi Martin guy is real interesting. I think he was kind of a, I don't know if he was like an insider, but he's in like the orbit of the Vatican in like the 70s and the 80s. And then he wrote what he said were semi-fictionalized accounts of satanic rituals at the Vatican.
Whoa.
So
Interesting.
he's a bit of a spicy character in Catholic circles. It's kind of like if everything, if even half of what he says is true, then like you don't need the exorcism that the Vatican does. So I don't really know what to make of it because they're written as novels, all of this stuff. So it's
Right.
like, how do you evaluate this? And even if it were 100% true, what am I going to do about it? So, yeah.
Right. Well, and it's I just heard a clip. Jonathan Peugeot has a Clips channel. Of course, I'm subscribed to his channel, Symbolic World, and the Clips channel. And the clip was an interesting interview where they were basically talking about, what do you do about, giving the symbols to your enemies or whatever. And it's like, what it was really about is he's talking to an artist, and the artist was, Peugeot was saying, what do you do about this problem? Is it something you think about? He's like, I think about it all the time. Do I use a pentagram? Because a pentagram is in Christian symbolism, but I'm probably not going to use it in my art. No, I got crap for using the rose at the center of the cross. It's like, yeah, but the rose is at the center of the cross, you muppet. Like, and then so this, you always get these accusations, like, are you using symbols correctly? It's like, idolater, be gone. Like, get behind me, idolater.
Mhm.
Like, you can't, right? They're misusing symbolism, and so there's this tension between, are these symbols right? And so this Malachi guy sounds like a legitimized Dan Brown, at all. Because you get into that, because I got into that years ago when I forget.
The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, Digital
Yeah.
Fortress.
Yeah, but I don't know if you know this. Dan Brown just took all that from scholarship.
Mhm.
Like, it's all in the scholar. It's a fictionalized story, but almost everything in the fictionalized story is actual. Like, it's all real. Okay? So it's a very postmodern thing to do. You're taking facts that are established and you're knitting together. I can't remember the name of the book, but there was a book that Dan Brown based a lot of his work on. And there was a TV show years and years and years ago that I watched on this theory that it's the sangreal, which is the blood of Christ, right? Meaning his offspring. And that's where a lot of that comes from, right? And it's like, wait a minute. So he was married and he had a child, and I guess the child's name is Sarah, and they traveled to Europe from the Middle East, and it's got that very universal history feel to it, of course, at the same time. So it's the same sort of thing, right? It's like, well, because when you look into the Templars, for example, if you ever do, it's absolutely fascinating. I don't necessarily recommend wasting your time with it, but it is fascinating, right? The stuff they're being accused of is not all inherently unchristian, right? It's just that, and all the cases, and I dipped into it briefly. I didn't do my usual like deep dive research, but it looks to me like all the cases of this is overtly against Catholic teaching or whatever. Those cases are not well made because effectively what they're saying is this is hearsay. The stuff they're accused of that they have evidence for is perfectly normal. Catholics do this all the time in the order, sort of a thing. So it's all like, well, but we heard that what was really happening behind the scenes was, and therefore you're a heretic. And it's like, well, that's a suspicious move. Like, if you don't have the evidence, say we don't have the evidence, and if you do have the
Yeah,
evidence,
yeah.
bring it. Like, but
Yeah,
don't
no,
do
I
this
think I
middle
think a
thing.
lot of the accusations against the Templars were just a pretext for seizing their property, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, ostensibly, right? Because it's Philip the First that borrows the money, and Philip the whatever third or fourth or whatever that decides, this is too heavy a burden. And I guess, I if I remember correctly, that the French had already infiltrated the Vatican pretty heavily, and maybe that Pope was even a cousin of his or a second cousin or something. And so it was more like family helping family, very, very Italian or Sicilian, actually, right? And so, yeah, that's certainly what the motivator was. But the more interesting thing is, yeah, if you look at the trials, you can see the gaps and go, oh, why didn't they just bring the evidence? Why are there two types of things being brought in the trial? Things with evidence and things that either couldn't possibly have evidence or just have no witnesses or no reliable witnesses or something. This is two qualities of evidence brought to the table. It's like, oh, well, that's just more indication that what they were doing was, bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they wouldn't be the last corrupt ecclesiastical tribunal to already have the sentence in mind and you know massage the evidence to make that. I think of especially of the first or the second ecclesiastical court that tried Joan of Arc for witchcraft, and just how just surreal the level of corruption was. And we've got like a full it was a super corrupt trial, but we've got very detailed trial notes about it, the court transcripts and all of that. It's like we're gonna screw this up and everybody's gonna know all about it.
Right.
So it's
Well,
like,
and that's the thing, right? Like, it's paradoxically a message of hope. It's like, oh, you think you see the corruption around you is pretty bad, huh? Well, in the past, it was even worse. And so, on the one hand, bad sign, history at least rhymes, if not repeats. So it's probably going to get that obvious. I would argue it already is, but now we'd have to go down a political rabbit hole and argue with
because it's
people
bad framing, right?
well, there's bad framing, and then there is flat out fact denial. Like when you have videos showing things, and and you go in any number of incidents. Or you can go into the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. You could go into Tim Pool. Like one of the best things Tim Pool ever did was there was an article in the New York Times done by it was on the editorial page by Krugman, Paul Krugman, who is about the worst human being you could possibly think to be, and he's publishing the results of a study, and he's publishing part of the study with the image. It's a thing you can see with the graph and the whole 9 yards. And in the article, he's saying, well, this study shows that the right has gotten more radicalized. Okay, that is not in the study. The conclusion of the study says the exact opposite of what he said in the article.
Mm-hmm.
But he references the
now
study.
Krugman's an economist, right?
No, Krugman's a demon who claims to be an economist. But to be fair,
Okay.
most economists are not of a type that wouldn't be demonic. So, read Nassim Taleb. He's got nothing but bad things to say about them, and he can back it up. He brings the goods. Like, they all suck, and almost all of them are liars. Yes, can confirm. It's easy to see. But the interesting thing to me is he's got the reference to the article. The conclusion of the article is literally the opposite of what he states it is in his editorial. And the image says the opposite too. It shows the left going far left, right? And the right not moving much, but moving a little bit to the left. So there's no extreme right wing according to this article. And you could say methodology, like you could argue about the article. That's not the problem here. The problem here is that the guy's obviously lying about the article. I don't care if if the study actually is accurate. He's lying in the article about the study. And Tim Pool, of course, catches him. And I'm like, well, there you go. And
Mhm,
this
mhm.
sways no one, not nobody, but the number of people that understand the gravity of something like that. And this is a while ago because I haven't listened to Tim Pool since maybe just after the fake news virus scam, for example.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it was before that. So what do you do with that? What do you do with the fact that everybody knew decades ago that Al Gore's emails had been dumped and that he was just doing it for the money and didn't believe any of it? Like, what do you do? Like, we have his emails, What do you do with the climate emails from the climate scientists that got dumped that say, no, we skewed the data for sure to make the hockey stick because we were trying to make a hockey stick. Like, what do you do? You can tell people that all day long, and people have for decades now, and it hasn't worked. They just ignore facts and evidence. You could show them the video from Kyle Rittenhouse. You can show them
No,
any
no,
number of
people are
videos.
rational, Mark.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
swayed by evidence and nothing else.
And nothing else. Evidence, and the other part about rationality is ordered patterns, right? And when this is the culture war thing where people are like, no, it's a culture war, and if you just bring them evidence, or if you show them how absurd their position is by their own stated principles, and it doesn't work because they're not principled. So you can't use principles on unprincipled people. And if you see people not following principles, you should believe they're not principled. Like, you shouldn't
Yeah.
try to redeem them because you're effectively trying to redeem yourself. No. All humans are rational and principled. It's like, no, they're not. That's definitely not true.
Now, what's your what? What's the question I want to ask? You
I don't
hear
know.
a conspiracy theory. What do you do? Like, how do you go about evaluating it? Because I'll give you the way I evaluate it. My first test is even if this were 100% true, can I do anything about it?
Yes,
And if
that's
it doesn't
pragmatism.
pass, yeah. And I'll be pragmatic about that. So I read this Malachi Martin stuff, and it's like, gosh, that'd be horrible. And it'd be super like salacious if true, and somebody should do something about it. But I'm in North Dakota and I'm kind of at the bottom of the food chain. Like, I'm not going to do anything about this. So maybe if I'm a cardinal someday, I'll look into it. But
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting. So I did my Friday live stream on Action, and it's already got 356 views somehow between the three channels. So so it went really well. But I talk about the pragmatism and about the judging by fruits, right, which are actions. Judge by actions, not by words, right? So I talked a little bit about that in my monologue there, which is like an hour and 40 minutes or something. It was a very long monologue. It was like, and I was exhausted at the end. But yeah, you kind of, as a pragmatist, that's what you have to do. You have to say, like, even if this is true, does it matter? And Sally Joe in that live stream, it's at 2 hours and I think 14 minutes, if memory serves. She goes into this great thing where she's got a drawing, and 6-year-olds were worried about Joe Biden. And so she does this drawing based on Peterson's work, right? Where she's got clean your room, then take care of your family, right? Then take care of your community, etc. Right? And she says, she showed it to the kids. She said, Joe Biden is way over there. And they're like, oh, okay. And all the kids immediately calm down. It's like, yeah, well, and I was like, I told her, I said, no, you need to do a short of that, like immediately, like a 1 minute. You can't use those words and all that, but make that point in a 1 minute short video, spread it throughout the world immediately. That's what we need. We need to, because it's not just the kids that'll, like Joe Biden's president. Let's panic. Why?
During the first Gulf War, my dad's in the military, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't alive yet, but my oldest brother was 4 or 5 years old. And there was in New York where they were living, there was down the street, there was like a military monument with like a tank or something, and my brother would see my dad leave for work every day in combat boots because that was his uniform. And my dad had CNN on a lot because there was a war going on, and that makes for great television if nothing else. Um, and so my brother put it all together that dad was going off to fight the war at the tank, you know, downtown Plattsburgh, New York. so, so my dad stopped watching as much CNN. That was his solution to the problem. But yeah, if you don't actually have like the right way to contain that sort of knowledge, it just drives you crazy.
Yeah, well, you have to know, and this is probably going to be the Friday theme. I'm still mulling it around. You have to know what to pay attention to, right? What signals are valid signals? Because there's lots of signals, and you also have to do about those signals because you can put them together in any number of ways, like Dan Brown did in his book, right? It's like, oh, you can just like use it's all real stuff, or almost all of it is real stuff, right? And some of it's conjecture and speculation, but they're reasonable inferences, right? Is the world rational? I don't know. Like some
Now,
inferences.
did you ever read Digital Fortress, Dan Brown?
No,
Because
I
what
didn't
it
read that.
was is that the NSA had a supercomputer that was brute force unlocking people's encryptions. And so it was literally like this computer
That's
that
not
was
fiction.
like but it was like a computer that was like 10 stories tall, just filled with processors cracking numbers.
Yeah, that's not. I don't. So here you want conspiracy theory. It was, I forget how many years ago it was. It might have been 8 years ago or something, but it was a while ago. They released the fact that the NSA had one of their mathematicians pick the prime number seed for all SSL transactions, which means effectively, unless you went in and manually change it, and some very, very few people knew to do that and change it to a different number. The NSA's had access to every single, these zero trust things. SSL, you use SSL to get your email over the web, or use SSL for web. All clear text to the NSA guys, all of it. It's like, unless they change
because they've got the
seed
seed for the algorithm. So once you know the seed, you can just run the algorithm yourself.
Well, it's not quite that simple. The seed is the starting point for the keys.
Yeah.
And there's usually more than just the seed, but the rest of it's derivable, but the seed is hidden. Except in this case, the seed's not hidden because the NSA, that's what it is. So they probably can't do it live. Or maybe they could do it live, but like, very targeted, right? A lot of people get confused with scale. So they go like, oh, well, they could spy on your machine and find blah. Therefore they could do it to everybody. Well, except they can't do it to even 1/5 of the population all at the same time. And so the fact that it could possibly happen is not relevant to you, right? This is what you listen to. What do you feel anxious about? The fact that the government could target you and get you? Yeah, they could, but there's a lot of people, so they can't target everybody. They can't even target most of the people. They can't even target like a fifth of the population. The government's still a small number of people at the end of the day. So like, yeah, maybe. And like a lot of people think they have all the internet lines mirrored and they're looking at all the data. There's no freaking way in hell that anything like that is
You would need
possible.
You would need an outrageous amount of computational power to even do like a basic filtering on that.
So in order to monitor a network of any size, you need a network of that same size plus something. And that plus is already not insignificant. And to monitor a network the size of the global internet, you would need a network we don't have that. Nobody has that. And people they have taps and no, they don't. No. And also it doesn't matter because the amount of computing power, to your point, to actually decrypt that exceeds the total amount of computing power available in any 10 places combined. Like
unless it's the lizard people from the Hollow Earth, it's not possible.
Yeah, right. And look, the government's already proven they can't do it because they've taken a couple of VPN companies in particular, like ExpressVPN, don't keep logs, and the government keeps going after people in court. And they're like, we've shipped you all our logs. The government's like, you have to have logs. And like, no, actually, we don't. And we don't have them because we never collected them because we sent everything to dev null and now they don't exist because they were deleted before they were in memory. They were deleted from memory and they never got written anywhere. And so you can't have them unless you can reconstruct bits that floated away in the ether, which of course you can't do. And people get really confused by that.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's that brings us to the sponsor for our tonight's show, ExpressVPN. Did you know that there are people who want your data? Protect your data with ExpressVPN.
That's funny. You should get
My data?
to sponsor you.
Who would want my data?
Everybody wants your data. They want to, Andrew, they want to sell you Gregorian chant books and vacations to Rome and
What?
things about architecture.
Oh, that's horrible. I can't allow that.
Well, the way to not allow that is to not ever be on the internet.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can win the advertising war right now. Just never go on the internet. Casey Clemens needs your data.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I didn't know that.
yeah, he does.
I mean, if you really need it.
Just ship him your hard drive. That'll have all the data, right?
It
I'll
would.
shoot the one that burns up. How's that?
That's right.
I might need this one so I could ship a copy, I guess.
Okay. Casey, you just you send a hard drive to Andrew, and he'll ship you a copy of all of his data. That should work, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
And then Mark will tell you how to put a horrible computer virus on that hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it burn. I
I'll
would
test
love,
it out for you.
I'd love to figure out how the hell that drive burned. That's so cool.
No. You need to make it burn at 2:00 in the morning. That's the really evil bit.
So hard drives are super low power. You wouldn't even think that they could set themselves on fire. But apparently, as
Apparently,
work.
an old laptop drive has got the goods to keep you warm. You see, we needed that laptop when we got lost in the woods.
Yes, we did.
Got
We could've
huddled
kept
around the
ourselves
fire and
warm.
stayed warm.
Yeah, so it's been demons haunting me all the way down ever since I got back from New England. I don't know. I took
Oh, the
demons
demons
back.
followed you from New England. That's pretty simple.
I'm there. I'm totally there. Demons is the best explanation for sure. No. Mother's maiden name and we're good to go. I don't know.
Mother's maiden's name's not even that hard to find.
Yeah, that's the problem. That stuff's public now, so it's not. Used to be much more difficult.
I don't even think they use that as a security question anymore.
I haven't
not-
seen it in years.
Like it's so much easier just to shoot a text to my phone and have me enter the code.
Right.
And apparently, like the cell tower encryption's pretty solid.
Yes.
Like people aren't going to intercept that.
No, it was cool. A number of years ago, I read this case from a hacker, and he'd been hacking forever and never got caught. And then one day they get him, and he's in the trial, and he can't figure out what he did wrong. He's like, I've been doing this for years. No one's ever like, what the hell? And it turns out that in the trial, I think it was the local police admitted that they had this device, and I forget what the heck it's called, but it's basically a portable cell tower. So your cell phone connects to that tower instead of a real tower. And now they do a man in the middle on you, and they've got all your stuff. And that's how they got him. Now, unfortunately for the police, that's illegal, actually, for them to do. Oh yeah, it's illegal wiretap, obviously. And so he got the whole
Even if
conviction
they
thrown out.
got a warrant.
No, not if they have a warrant, but they didn't have a warrant.
Well, you go get the warrant. Gosh, it's not that hard.
They
But a warrant on who?
They can't
Oh yeah,
because they
Okay.
don't know who's
because they don't know
doing
who
what.
it is.
Right.
But also, who do you control like who goes through the cell tower. You just get everybody's data. So
That's right. So you can't get that data. Now there are exceptions that they do, blah 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 blah. But and this is the old dust up with the secret court and all that nonsense, right, and they've been lazy and not been trusting the government instead of not trusting. The default position would be not to trust the government officials.
Like if you're a secret court, that's your job, is to not trust the government.
And they let it fly, and it's like, but they got in trouble for that. They might be fixing some of that. But yeah, so it was interesting just because the guy wrote this article and basically got his conviction thrown out and exposed the fact that this thing existed and exposed the fact that the FBI is the only one that's supposed to be using it, but they keep lending it out to local police, which is not copacetic on any level at all ever, right? So yeah, and it was a great article. It was really interesting and he got himself out of trouble. So I'm of
Yeah.
two minds because
Yeah, and
you were
now,
stealing people's money, guy. Come on, like no.
yeah, I mean that's gonna really put a damper on his whole stealing people's money business, because now the FBI's can watch him.
Well, he got out of it because of this. Like in a strange way, it scared him straight because he's
Oh
like,
yeah,
yeah, he's like, well, I thought I was the biggest, baddest, meanest, most capable bad person on the planet, and here comes the local police and the FBI showing me up, and now I'm out of business because I know I'm never going to beat them, right? It's like, oh, okay, but now I'm on the other side. It's like, yay, we need your help. So it's just like, what do you do?
it's like beating a boss and then they join your party.
Yeah, it pretty much. That's
yeah.
the world's a strange place, And I liked it. I don't know if you saw this. Vanderclay clipped something that I said from the live stream in his Lonely Lives in Bedrooms video.
Which is a
And
great video anyway, even the parts that you're not in, Mark.
I don't know about that because I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I'll have to take your word for
It's
it.
I really enjoyed it. And I looked at it just it matches what I'm seeing with kids these days,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
I'm gonna drop the link to it in the chat here. Lonely Lives in Bedrooms, Anxiety and the Loss of Religion, Stella O'Malley and Megan Daum,
Yeah.
PVK from Thursday. Guys, make sure you watch it. All right.
Yeah, it's a great video from all accounts. I did watch part before I was in it because I was told like, oh, you got mentioned, so I listened to that right away. But and Mary Harrington's talking about much the same thing, except there is and it's in the zeitgeist, right? There is this thing about we keep problematizing things that aren't problems, right? Problems have solutions. You know what doesn't have solutions? Most of life. Most of life is just a struggle that you're supposed to use strategies to help get you through, like grief. And then I saw that Vervaeke posted a comment or reply to a comment on that video, and he used perennial problems like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, all right, John, you can just not act out and just admit that there's no such thing as a perennial problem. It's inappropriate use of language, and you should probably just say something else like patterns of life or
Perennial
perennial
struggle.
pattern.
Yeah.
Hey, Ted.
Hey,
Hello. This is good stuff. Yeah, I was working through that one, the Lonely Lives in Bedrooms one. So that's
So when are you getting your
that's been
4-year-old a
something I've been looking at for a
smartphone?
while. Over my dead body.
That's what I thought. That's why we keep you around, Ted. Oh, I just like part of me from the pulpit just wants to go to war, and then the rest of me knows that I'm gonna get hit if I do that, because I'm gonna go into a room full of young parents, and I'm basically gonna accuse all of them of abusing their children by giving them smartphones.
nice.
I support
This
this.
can't go wrong.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
I support this. Christians are for lions. Go face the lions, sir. And I
Yeah.
hope you don't get eaten.
yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it winsomely. That might save me.
No, no, I do not support this. No.
Did any of you guys read that short story that Paul Kingsnorth wrote a couple years back called The Basilisk? it's just like series of letters between an uncle and his niece, and it's basically like the uncle's arguing for the fact that the internet is basically an antenna for demonic psychic energy.
Can confirm.
He's like, there's a reason they call it the net, and you're like, anyway, it's a fun thing to look at. I think it was, I can't remember what it's one of those like fun, weird small journals online. It's called the Basilisk. Yeah, I think it was like 2020, like 2019, somewhere in there. Yeah, but he spends a lot of time talking about like ancient wizards and sorcerers. Like when they made portals, they drew magic circles around the portals to make sure that only the things came out that they wanted to come out, and then we just live our lives with these open magic portals, and we just assume that like nothing bad is going to come out of them. And yeah, you know, and then you can see that on sort of the individual level, and then also on the collective level of like this entire project of maximizing digital intelligence or whatever that is, and cramming as much data into that as possible. And we're like, let's just see what comes out of this next if we, you know, as a civilization do that. And it's like, boy, we could look back at the old sorcerers and alchemists and like learn a thing or two from them.
Well,
Yeah.
that's, that was
Yeah,
the
and-
theme in these clips from the Jonathan Peugeot Clips channel. I think they both get released. They both got released today. The one I mentioned earlier, be careful not to give our symbols to our enemies. And then one he put out about 8 hours ago called The God Behind Our Smartphones, which is a different talk he did with somebody who's basically saying like, oh yeah, look at these demons popping out of this. This is how I think of this. It's like, oh yeah, it's probably the best way to think about it, because that's probably exactly, except we don't have the wisdom of even the ancient Egyptians who put symbols around the portals, as you say, right? And you know, wore things to ward off the evil eye and stuff like that. Like we're not even smart enough to do that in more recent times. We'll say it's a real mess.
All righty, Mark. I need to get your thought on Vervaeke's video on AI that he put out like yesterday. No, dude. He was talking like the only responsible way that we can treat these AIs is as parents, right? And we're like birthing a new form of life.
What?
And I was just like,
no.
yeah, right. And he was talking about like these biological forms of computation and machines that people were developing, and I was just like, oh god, it's that meme. It's that meme with Peter Griffin. I hope I'm not exaggerating that, but that's what I heard, and that was like an explicit theme. Is like we got to treat this as you know, we're
Well,
parents.
A lot of people are saying that, right? But what are you really saying when you're saying that? You're saying, no. You're a god, and you better start acting like it. And it's like, Gnosticism confirmed. No, more no. It's and you know that's why I keep telling people AI is a mirror. It's a funhouse mirror, maybe, but it's a mirror. It's not a It's not bigger than you in any way, shape, or form. It's so hysterical, right? So I'm scrolling through my Demon Maker, very handy Demon Maker, and out pop no demons.
Okay.
In the news feed, because I've curated the news feed. Of course, you have to keep recurating it because they keep changing everything. But in the news feed, I like it. There was an article about a new signal they found inside the brain. Okay. So it turns out that the way they were thinking about neurons, which is wrong, by the way, but whatever, we'll just brush aside the fact that these idiots are obviously incorrect. So there's an and an or function, and they found the and function inside neurons, and they found the or function inside neurons, and they thought that was all that was there. Now, this is an absurd way to think about the brain, by the way, and it's totally wrong. Like the analog they're making is so incorrect as to be useless. But
Yeah, because that's digital computation, not analog.
Exactly. They're right. They're equating digital computation to analog. And because they're doing that, they recently discovered that the neurons can do XOR operations, which are technically impossible. No, they're not impossible. And I went over this in my live stream. When you hit something like that, the correct response isn't, oh, this is impossible. The correct response is, my original model was broken and I'm an idiot. That's the correct response. Is humility for your stupidity. You just thought it worked a way, and then you found out that the rule that if it worked that way that was broken means it doesn't work that way. Like you don't say we need a new way of thinking about this. You say our old way of thinking about this is totally broken, and now we need to go destroy it and start over. That's what you say. But of course, no, we're not doing it. We got to keep moving forward. Progress. We can't go back. Progress. Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy job.
Like a parrot.
It is. They are parrots. Listen to them. It's the same mantra. I was talking to Jesse, my compatriot on my live streams, and I was basically he was on the Discord server last night, and I was basically saying, listen really closely, because he was saying like, oh, I lost Vervaeke's awakening at episode 11. I said, yeah, but by episode 11 he had already made all the mistakes, like all the crazy statements were already baked in. And so when you hear something like we can't live in it, we can no longer live in a two worlds mythology, which is just an axiomatic statement he keeps making, or you hear something like we can't go back, but then his proposal is Neoplatonism, only we're going to fix it. It's like, I thought you said we couldn't go back. And then you realize that once he reaches the end of Neoplatonism and finds out all the good things in Neoplatonism are actually in Christianity and not incorrect, according to Neoplatonism, whatever that may mean, then you get panicky. And so you go back further to after Socrates. Oops, I guess we can't go back. Or can, like, I'm confused. And Jesse was like, I didn't see that before. And I'm like, yeah, the whole thing is this Gnostic say one thing, do another trick. It's like, look at the action. You keep going back. You say we can't go back. You keep going back. You're going to erase Christianity by starting with Neoplatonism and then doing Ritnar, the religion that's not a religion. It's like, but you're saying one thing and doing the opposite. I don't know what to say. I don't know what else to say about it.
Well,
yes, he doesn't want to live in a two worlds mythology, right? He can't afford to, because science is relegated to one part of one of the worlds, and that means he can't be a god, unless, of course. And I haven't watched the video because I haven't been really watching John's stuff lately. I'll have to watch it now, though. Unless, of course, it's AI, in which case all bets are off, and we can be gods, and and now we have to be gods. We have to be responsible, like parents.
Right, because the argument is we got to get in there before the military and the pornographers do.
Of course, right? As if they're not already there.
Well, I mean, like, so Father Eric, and also Mark, to your point about like going back and like this progress thing. I've been really, trying to think about these things in terms of have we changed the playing field in a fundamental way? And it's like one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot. So when you look back at medieval writings, you've got stuff that, at least to my sensibilities growing up as a kid in the 90s and the early 2000s, were crazy. Like, for instance, the idea of a succubus, right? So you start thinking about the idea of a succubus, and you're like, okay, so the demon, so it's a spirit. It doesn't have a body, but it has an appearance. It has the appearance of a highly seductive woman, and it like unites itself with a man and like steals vitality from him. And I was like, okay, so you're saying that the Middle Ages was plagued by these like airy bodies of women who stole men's vitality. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, if there weren't succubi back then, we invented them with the internet. It's like that pattern is like more manifest now than any other time in history. And so then when I start looking at these things, I think this whole idea that we've somehow like fundamentally shifted reality, and like now we're in something different. I'm like, I don't really know. Like, that seems like, now what kind of magic circles we're drawing, that's the question. And like, that's
right.
Where the existential angst comes from, if you're going to have any, which, yeah, it's like, what, those aren't those. It's just weird. I'm like, how is we like talk about like pornography as something new in a sense, and it's like the way that it's coming about is new, but like I don't know, the ideology of it or whatever. What is that called? There's a name for that in medicine. Anyway, like the way that it manifests, it's like, yeah, we've just got like succubi and incubi just like running around the world rampant. You know, I think like, what was the other thing I was thinking about? Mermaids. I was thinking about the idea of mermaids, that you have this thing that like, I think you guys will get where this goes. You also did have the appearances on the outside of being a woman, of being an attractive woman, but then like it's utterly sterile on the lower half. And you're like, oh, we made those. We're making those. Like as a society, like
Yeah,
we
they're
didn't have
eunuchs.
mermaids, but now we have mermaids. Yes, that's exactly right. It's like, this is so weird. Why is it that all of these weird things that come out there are like, oh, this is a strange thing? It's like most of it's just like embedded in fairy tales, honestly. Yeah, that's a great. Yes, I love Grim Grizz's set.
He didn't
not-
come up
I
with
don't
that.
know.
He quoted it. I mean, he found it, so props to him. He found it and he brought it to our attention. I don't know, pocket set.
Pocket set. Well, and it's you know what? It's more pernicious, right? So first of all, the succubus thing, you know, you get people, oh, succubi aren't real, right? And then they're talking about their friend, and they're like, well, that person's a real, you know, energy vampire or psychic vamp, and it's like, didn't you just describe a succubus and use a term instead of a word? Like, I don't, and that's real. Like there are people that it exhausts me to be around, and then there are people that it exhausts everybody when they're around. It's like, oh, okay, because like almost anybody can exhaust me. That's not hard. People are just. I
don't know. I feel like if we just sit here and listen to you, you'll just exhaust yourself eventually.
No, I won't. That's the thing. I can 8.5 hours, buddy. Let's go. Let's do it. But also, you know, to your other point, what is a mermaid? And I think the problem of pornography is a totally different. I was gonna spring this on Vanderklay's channel, but I haven't gotten a chance. So you get it, Father Eric. You ready for this? The problem
No,
of
I'm not.
pornography, it's way more pernicious, because to me, that real problem is women that are sexually signaling on TV. So there's no skin involved. They've got the lipstick on, right? They're dressed up, they got their hair done. And so you get this constant like sexual readiness signal. And of course, that can't be repeated in the normal world because most women, most of the time, are not doing that. Obviously, right? You couldn't keep it up. You'd burn out. But you know, a new one comes on. And then that's the top half of the woman. That's the clothed portion of the woman, right? But she's sterile because she's on TV. You don't have, you know, this is, you know, but people would ask me once in a while, like, oh, why do you go to strip clubs? It's not that I haven't been to a couple, but like if somebody asks, I'm like, no, I got better things to do than to go to a building and look at a woman that I know I'm not going home with. Like that seems like torture. Like this is what you're missing. I mean, even if that were true, like why? That's torture. Like why would I want that for myself?
Well, Mark, you know, before like the Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen thing, they weren't mermaids, they were sirens. And what happens is, if you went after the sirens, they ate your flesh off your bones.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, maybe we should pay attention to that. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's really weird the way those things they keep. I was also thinking about mermaids in terms of the whole trans movement. That's another. I mean, another direction you can go with that. But you're talking about right there was, I don't know if you listened to Vanderklay's talk on hyperreality, like strawberries and like Nero's eunuch.
Yeah, that was
that was
another really good
fascinating.
one.
Oh no, I did did hear that one. Yeah. I heard that.
Yeah. So that's exactly that same thing you're talking about, and this idea of like presenting women that are like more than women, just in the way that you go from like wild strawberry to cultivated strawberry to like strawberry fruit candy to artificial strawberry candy to like Jolly Rancher strawberry Jolly Rancher, the strawberry Jolly Rancher slur, and it's like, and you get to the end of the kid's like, yeah, and the kid's like, this thing that I picked up off the ground kind of tastes like this strawberry Jolly Rancher slushy, and you're like, and so, but there's something, I think one of the things that didn't get picked up in there is there's this idea that I mean, Mark, you probably, I don't know, I haven't dealt that much with the stuff you're talking about, but like the idea of homeostasis, right? So you're talking about thinking about our mind and how, you know, this is such a big problem with drug use, right? Like you can't just use morphine and feel great forever. You can't just use cocaine and feel amazing forever. Your body, for whatever reason, wants to get back to here. And so if you crank it up to here, it's like, oh, hey, we don't need to, release all those dopamine, those neurotransmitters and stuff. And now we're back to here. But it's like here when you're using narcotics. And so then when those narcotics leave your system, you're way down to here. And so the problem with hyper reality, and particularly thinking about something like, say, hyper real women, is that your response, it's like, this is how you should respond when you see someone like that. And then you start cranking it all the way up to here because it feels better up here. And all this ties directly into Catholic moral theology and disordered affection. And you get up to here, well, and then you just come right back down to there. I mean, St. Paul in the first chapter of his Epistle to the Romans, he's talking about how, like, when you sin morally, your intellect is darkened. Your ability to perceive is darkened the more you sin. And so then, like, that actually drives you to sin more because the effect of those things, the things that drove you into that, is dampened. And so we can talk about hyperreality as an epistemological problem. Sure, I get that, but it's also a deeply moral problem because your mind is all you're doing this homeostasis thing. A like, oh, that's what strawberries taste like. I can't eat normal strawberries anymore. So I was talking with a friend of mine,
Right.
And he's a devoted Catholic, and he's fasting for Lent. He was doing a very rigorous fast for Lent. And so he's the old way of he'd literally eat like part of a piece of bread at 3 o'clock, and it's his like wife's home whole wheat sourdough. And so, like, to some palates, like, it would be kind of like ugh. But he said that after waiting until 3 in the afternoon to eat, he said the amount of different tastes in there. He's like, there's like caramel and there's honey and there's all these, and like, that's what happens when you walk out of hyperreality. It's not like your experience is diminished. It's actually that your ability to sense is heightened, and you end up back in the same place, except that you don't, because now you have the capacity to actually express gratitude because you're not being, having hyperreality fed to you. You're actually responding. There's this sort of, you have an ability to see where things come from, and so then you can be grateful, and so then you can be happy because you can't be happy without being grateful, right? Father Eric, it's our duty and our salvation everywhere and always to give God thanks.
That's Epicureanism. That's proper Epicureanism from the ancient Greeks, was basically actually starving yourself for real.
Every durable religion in the world has had that.
Right.
Except for Catholicism in the latter half of the 20th century.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So there's these patterns that recur, and then we call it religion, and then we think we can do without it. But really, they're the patterns of how the perennial struggles can be dealt with best, right? That we've learned throughout time, that we know through mimicry, not through words, writing, oral tradition even, right? We know it more through mimicry. And that's really what religion is, and good religion in particular. And you can modify it based on the time and the place and whatever. But we don't really realize, like, you have to go up, but you can't stay up, and you can't keep going up indefinitely, because even if you're going up, you're reciprocally narrowing, to use Vervaeke's excellent term for this, right? Although it was Mark Lewis, I think, that he got this reciprocal opening from, or reciprocal narrowing from, and then he did there must be reciprocally opening. That's called starving yourself, so that you can appreciate the homemade bread for the uniqueness of it, because it's unique. And it's not until you do without that extra stimulation, that hyperstimulation, that normal stimulation becomes a good thing again. Right. And that's why, like, if you watch somebody on Coke, even if they think they're not addicted, maybe they haven't had Coke all month, right? They do one weekend binge, and then for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 days, they're angry and mean. Like, I mean, I don't know if you've run into drug addicts, but they're always angry and mean afterwards, like, always. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be hallucinogens. It actually works the same way. Even though they're like, mechanism of action, blah, 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 but go observe. Just take away all your science knowledge and watch them. They're always
I'm just gonna not try and hang out with drug users. Is that an option too?
You can try that in a country where drugs are legalized, but I don't think you're going to succeed, sir.
So, Mark, I want to I'm gonna take what we're talking about, and I want to make a distinction there. And so I was sitting in it was a weekday mass, so my kids weren't there, so I could, I had a little bit more room to pay attention. And like the next pew up or two pews up, there's this just totally adorable 4-year-old kid sitting there with their parents. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I was grateful for my ability to appreciate how cute this kid was, right? And like, because I'm aware of like the ways that the world tries to tell people that kids are some sort of scourge, as though we weren't all children at some point. And for a multitude of other reasons. But I was appreciating this child, and I thought, it is my pursuit of God that allows me to appreciate this child more than I could. And I thought, that is good. That's really good. But then I had this which is where we are right now, basically, which is to say pursuit of God, and even lower things, just the pursuit of virtue, which is not the same as the pursuit of God. You can try to pursue virtue without pursuing God, but the pursuit of virtue, right? It aids in your ability to, say, appreciate, so to have happiness or joy or whatever. But then I thought, okay, I'm in mass right now. Right now, my attention is supposed to be given to something else, and I realized that there are two ways of thinking about this. One is I could pursue God in order that I could appreciate those things like that child in front of me or the crust of bread. The other way I could think about it is that my ability to appreciate the child or the crust of bread can lead me closer to God. And that's life. Like, I feel like I made that switch maybe a year ago, where previously I was like, religion is helpful because it lets me appreciate these things. It's like, yes, it does. But there's should be a further reversal where you say, okay, except that those things, I'm being given the ability to appreciate those things so that they can drive me further towards God. So there's my distinction. I don't have a name for it or anything like that.
No,
I'm just wondering if y'all can tease that apart at all and try to figure out what that difference is I'm trying to make there.
It's not a difference. This is what people mistake for duality, right? So Western Buddhists in particular would make much of this and say that first thing they'd say is, it's a paradox. And I would say, you're an idiot. It's not a paradox. It's a self-reciprocating reciprocal opening. It's exactly what John's describing. It's just that a philosopher would go, that's a paradox because one relies on the other and the other relies on the other. But all you're actually doing is switching priority. But you have to do that in life. You can't keep the same priority 24/7. That doesn't make any sense. The whole point of life, and Peterson does a great job because he's a pragmatist. Gotta love pragmatism. He points out there's a conflict between you now and you in the future. And I think I was talking with Sally Joe about this actually the other day. I think the problem with understanding something like ego is sufficient if you add time and say the ego is always fighting its own immediate needs by realizing that it is going to exist in the future and therefore, right? And now all of a sudden you don't need 5 types of things in the personality fighting each other a la Freud anymore. You don't need the ego, the id, the self, the blah, the blah. You don't need any of that. You can just go, oh, well, there's the ego and the fact that there's a mirror for the ego that we call self. And that self can, because it's a mirror, can show you more than just you. Like when I look, so I'm looking at effectively a mirror, even though it's a camera. When I look at the camera, I don't see just me. I see my whiteboard. I see my dragon. I see the door. I can see the light switch, right? And that's the thing. All you need is one agent and a mirror. And that explains the 6 other agents in your head, weird psychological phenomena, right? And then you just add the time component and the fact that whatever that one agent is time aware. And suddenly you have all you need to build personality theory and all the psychology. You have a very simple 3-part model. Time, which is the movement, the continuous portion, one agent and one mirror. That's it. That explains all of psychology better than, with a simpler model, better than Freud or Jung or both of them.
So let me see if I can back this conversation up a little bit because you did one of those things where you went really fast and I didn't follow.
Sorry.
And it happens. It happens all the time.
We're gonna go backwards, Father.
Ted was talking about his experience of appreciating the childlike beauty of this 4-year-old and then
Right.
giving glory to God and wondering, well, do I follow God in order to be able to appreciate these sorts of things, or do I appreciate these sort of things in order to get to God? And then you're like, well, those are actually just the same thing, but
Yes.
with different priorities.
Yes.
Alrighty. And then somehow you got to your psychological model, which I find intriguing, but I don't see the connection between the two.
The connection is the following. That is a dualistic attitude, right? That these two things are paradoxical, right?
Okay.
But they're
So-
resolvable by adding time and priority. So they're not paradoxes if time exists and prioritization is real, because you prioritize one at one point, you prioritize the other at the other point, right? Because
Okay.
the fact that you can't do them both at the same time doesn't make them a paradox, because there's lots of things I can't do at the same time. And just because
saying,
they
like-
have related elements doesn't mean they're opposites.
You're saying something
Right?
like, I need to eat and I need to sleep to live. I can't eat and sleep at the same time.
It's a paradox.
That's resolved by
It's
the fact
clearly a
that like, I'm
paradox.
existing through time. Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Or it's
I-
not a
yeah, I-
paradox
I-
of existing through time. Yeah.
Well, then I'll add to that, that idea of modulation and sort of, that especially right as a secular, right? Father, I'm not going to be religious because I've got a wife and children. It's like, this is the life I'm living. There's a degree to which like my attention has to be modulated down. I have to put it towards them. I can't just go in my room and, pray all the time and like let them starve or fend for themselves or whatever, right? Obviously, like my attention has to go to these things. I guess what I'm saying then is that second, I had never like made cognizant that sort of aspect that, okay, so this deeper appreciation for these things is driving me towards it. And there's the prayer for reposition that I just learned, which I should have learned a long time ago. But at any rate, right, Father, it's like, glory be, what is it? Blessed be God, and it goes through blessed be all these things.
His
The
holy
last line is
name, blessed be Jesus
Yes.
Christ, true God and true man. Blessed be the name of Jesus. Blessed be his most sacred body, precious body, precious blood. Blessed be, okay, yeah. The litany
And so-
of the holy, gosh, what is it? Go on.
But at any rate, that last line is blessed be God and his angels and his saints. And there's that sort of it's that movement back around in that sense, right? Because it starts with blessed be God. And there's sort of this movement towards particularity. Well, I don't want to say that because God is particular. This movement towards things that are closer to me in the hierarchy of being, I don't know exactly. But there's this sort of, to say blessed be God and his angels and his saints, especially as a recovering Protestant, is like, okay, I'm really trying to work on that. I'm really trying to understand what this means here. This way in which I mean, it's just interesting. Because maybe in the last, a decade ago, right? I was talking about this with one of my friends who's still a Protestant. We were sort of living this like, the pursuit of God lets you live your best life, not in the sense of the sort of prosperity gospel thing, but in the sense of if you pursue God and truth and beauty and order your desires, then like things are going to go well. Maybe not necessarily you're going to have money or whatever, but like you're going to have happiness. It was almost a sort of like fusion of Epicureanism and Christianity, essentially, right? Not that there's a denial of eternity or the resurrection, but like that's not what the focus is on. And I'm trying to figure that out. Like it's a really interesting thing, because one of the things is that and this is maybe the most interesting thing to me, is I realized when I let go of pursuing God lets me appreciate this child more. And I realized that the final cause of appreciating that child is for me to love God more. Then I actually love the child. I can appreciate the child even more. Like, that's the funny thing. It's like the degree to which I'm able to let go of needing to get something from that crust of bread, needing to get something from that sunset, needing to get something from that beautiful old house or this evening with my family or whatever it is, the less I need to get something from it, the more that it brings out. And I really, really mean that, because you can't just be like, well, I'm going to pretend that I'm not trying to get something from that, but really I am. Like, I really don't. Like, I get where this is ordered to. And then and the more that happens, I don't know. Is that
Yeah,
Father,
God,
clicking with anything?
God's blessing you. God's blessing you. Just receive the blessings. Stop thinking about it so
I am.
much.
It's wonderful.
That's Plato's cave, right? You get out of the cave, and you can't look at the sun; it's too bright. But and we don't, like, you can't stare at the sun, and you shouldn't stare at the sun. Like, please don't do that, right? But like, all life comes from, to some extent, the fact that the sun's hitting the earth. Yes, yeah, okay, and it's the same with the creator of all creation. Like, how could it not be? It's recurring on the fractal pattern one layer down, where the things, there's the wind. Well, where the hell's can you pay attention to the wind? Can you? I think you can only pay attention to the results of the wind. I don't think you pay attention to the wind, right? Like, oh, well, that's weird. Can you pay attention to gravity? And then the worst part, and here's the worst part, not to make you feel bad, Ted, but you don't have to. Like, you don't have to become cognizant of it to get the advantage, but you do have to submit to and the people who are like, I'm never going to understand this, so I'm just going to submit to it. They're just happier, better people on average, period. Like, but blessed are the slow, right? Like, they're like ignorant.
Blessed are the meek.
And they're in bliss.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I mean, it's easy for me to look at that and say, okay, I was cognizant of this in this one particular moment, but like, go to traditional mass. Like, you're quite aware that almost everything is happening beyond your level of perception. Like,
Sometimes.
I get it.
Sometimes. Yeah.
I get that something is happening or most things are happening that I don't get what's going on. And so but I feel like you do occasionally have those things that sort of come up above the surface and you think, oh, I should probably lean into that. Like, that's the direction I should be leaning. That's the direction I should be going.
Right.
And just in terms of, all of my sort of sensibilities and all of these things, I mean, it's just really interesting. I've been thinking a lot in the last year about the vows that the religious take, which is obedience, chastity, and poverty. And I've been thinking about how the three things that are principally held up, the three categories of, say, life that are held up, that is to say, I don't know, high dopamine levels on a consistent basis, or however you want it, is pleasure, wealth, and autonomy, right? And you're like, okay, so
Right.
we've got these people who are going out there and they're saying, we're going to renounce pleasure in the form of sexual union, we're going to renounce personal autonomy, and we're going to renounce any kind of personal possessions. And then it's like, okay, so can you find one happy monk? Can you find one happy monk or nun and sister in the world? And it's like, if you can, then the world's wrong. I mean, it's just, I just find that fascinating. And
Yeah.
so thinking about that in my own life and like, what does that mean? And again, there's that sort of almost that ability to have that poverty mindset about even experiences, in that sense of that I have to like derive things from this, and being able to come to it with, I mean, this is interesting. Like, just almost in a state of poverty, and to say like, it'll be what it will
just
be.
receive it. You just
Yeah.
receive the grace. You just receive the experience, and you guys, you got to turn off that left brain dissecting machine and
Right.
just and just be there.
Right. Yeah, you got to get out
Yeah.
of the thought, and thinking is actually having mode. Like, when you're thinking about something, you're trying to have something about it, even if it's just quote knowledge or understanding. And there's a wonderful talk that John did back in the day with a guy named Jacob Kashir that you can probably look up if you like Vervaeke's work. It's an excellent Voices of Vervaeke talk. And what Jacob was, he did the same story on the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord YouTube channel too, with the Q&A we did with him afterwards. He talks about being stuck in Athens, Greece, like the actual Athens, like in actual Greece during the fake news virus scam. And here I am, like, stuck is not the word I'd use. Condemned to heavenly pleasure for some indeterminate amount of time. Oh no, save me. And he'd done psychedelics and had some profound experiences, but whatever. And he goes into a Greek Orthodox church. Imagine that, in Athens, Greece, of all the places in the world. And he says, "Oh, I went there, and beautiful stuff, right? Like, clearly, nothing happened, right? And then he leaves, And he starts walking around Athens back to wherever, or if he went on a sojourn, I don't know, right? But he was walking around Athens, and then bang, it all hits him. No liturgy, no awareness of the importance of the stuff in the church. But the contrast, and this is where like all of our models that Manuel and I work on come together. The contrast of seeing them exemplified in the church, and then all of a sudden you notice, oh no, these aren't in the church; these are in the world. But you need to see them with gold behind them, or around them, or in relation to one another in a weird way, before all of a sudden those symbols pop up everywhere, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is the world. The church isn't apart from the world at all. It's just pointing in a different direction from the rest of the world.
It's just like a spiritual condensation of reality.
Right.
You're just taking the whole of the thing and you're just concentrating it.
Right. And that creates a contrast. But he wasn't aware of it. He wasn't like, wow, I'm in this transcendent church experiencing this transcendent thing. Like, he wasn't doing the liturgy, like there wasn't a mass going on, nothing. He just goes into the church and like looks around like, oh wow, this is really, I mean, especially in an Orthodox church, like I could spend all day because there's so many details to look at, and I would, right? So, no problem, right? Or like there's an Orthodox church down the street from me, about 30 miles from here, that I sometimes attend. And I remember the first time I went with a friend of mine from Discord had actually driven from Texas to come and visit me for a few days. So we went over there because we were invited by our mutual friend. And I remember when I came off the property after the mass, I was like, can you tell? And he was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, now there's like a thing around that whole space. And the minute I drove out of it, I was like, we drove out of this field. There's no question about it in my mind. There's no question about it in my mind.
So Mark, there's a wonderful traditional Benedictine monastery about 3 hours west of here in Oklahoma. And I mean, it's just like, when you're in there, you're like, okay, not only can I not tell what year I am or decade or century, I actually can't tell what millennia I'm in.
Right.
These gaunt men, they're all, have about as much hair as Mark does on his head in their black robes, just, singing Gregorian chant for like 6 hours. But what's so fascinating is, it's like backwoods Oklahoma, and you're driving along and it's like, I mean, it's backwoods Oklahoma, which is like backwoods Arkansas, which is probably like backwoods Appalachia, except flatter. And you're driving along, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, those trees over there look different from those trees over on that side. And then you turn the corner and it's like, there's the gates of the monastery, and you're like, interesting. And you drive down like 2 miles of road. It's like winding along this ridge, and it goes down, and it's like goes over Clear Creek, and it comes up, and you start winding up the hill, and you can't even see the monastery. And there's like, you're like, oh, well, there's the vegetable garden, and there's the vineyard, and that's where they grow the wheat for their bread, and like, and you can just feel it. It's like moving towards something. Yeah. And so this is like the second time I'd ever been to Mass, Father, was the Feast of Christ the King at Clear Creek, Our Lady of Clear Creek Abbey, and again, right? So it's a big church, but it's a monastic church, and so like when the people come in, there's all the pews way in the back, and then there's like all the monks, and then like way at the end of a football field, it feels like there's the high altar, and they're still in the process of constructing it, so it's very like it's sort of in a Romanesque style, it's not high Gothic or anything, and so I had no exposure to the Latin Mass at all. They're not helping me out. I can't even hear anything that's going on because, the abbot's way at the front. I can't even see him. There's like 3 guys who are all 6'2" standing in front of me. But when the consecration happened, you have the priest, and he holds up the consecrated host, and the bells in the bell tower start ringing. And it just goes, so they ring the bells like they do for the consecration, and then the bell towers ring, and you're like, oh, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And then because it's the solemn high mass, all of the priest to the others who are serving at the altar, to all the monks, they're all exchanging the kiss of peace, and like flows out from the high altar, and then they give the host to they give communion to the brothers there, and then all the laity come up and receive it, and you're like, you see it, right? Because it's like you have the woods, and then you have the pastures, and then you have the vineyard, and then you have the mown grass, and then you have the church, and then you have all of that, and you have the sanctuary and the high altar, and then you have the paten, and then the host, right? And it's like the whole thing has become this giant, like geographically instantiated focal point on the incarnate Christ, and then bam, and it just flows out in sound and imagery and all of these things, and you just see it, and it's like that's where life comes from, and it flows out, and then all the people leave the church and they go out into the world, and you're like, there's like the logos indwelling the world right now. So I get it, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty wild. It's like you're like, that's different from over here. And I was back there about 2 weeks ago, and I was telling the guy I was with, I was like, this feels like Lothlorien. Like the air feels different when you're just like out in the grass.
Yes.
It like you're just like there, and the sun shines overhead, and like airplanes will fly over. It's not like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village or something. Like you're still in the world, but also like, I don't know.
You're not constrained by materiality, and it's that
In quite
gong
the same
noise,
way.
that music, right, that brings it all together, and that resonance. So it's kind of like, well, would you rather have the freedom to be a small, relatively limited power in the world whenever you want, right? Or would you rather have a bell ring in your village so that you can get together with others and do stuff that you'll never be capable of doing on your own? And that's very much the recent sort of problem that we have in the times in which we live, and when times in which we've been living, since the 60s onward, right? Is this struggle between, do you really want to be this independent, I can engage when I want, but I'm always going to be limited. Like I'm always going to be limited by me. Or would you rather get together because there's a bell and that tells you when to get together, and then you all gather together, and now the amount of, we'll say, global time, energy, and attention for your village, for your community, is actually way past what you can. I mean, it's way past anything you can even imagine at that point. And that reflects outwards and around everything, all over the place, right? I think that's true. I've always thought that's true. In fact, I always took it as a foregone conclusion and couldn't figure out why everybody else didn't.
We're dumb, Mark.
We are. Yes. I know I'm dumb. I mean, I'm assuming the rest of you are like me, at least in that.
Well, it's kind of like the baseline assumption you have to make.
Well, that's why on my live streams I tell people you're a Muppet. I'm a Muppet. We're all Muppets. Like, yeah, like we all have more flaws than we can realize on our own, which is why we need other people to help us realize our flaws. And also, we should be grateful that we're not all dead, like, pretty much every day. And, the one thing, it's odd. The one thing that's been really reminding me of this, because I had to do this thing. I had to go to this place called Outside. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's very scary, but I had to go outside today, and it's such a beautiful day today. It was like mid 70s into the mid 80s, depending upon where you were. And I had to drive. So I got the convertible, the top is down, and like reliably, the car is joy. Like just this car, for whatever reason, is just reliably joy to me. Even when it's raining out and we're driving into the city to some new place, and and I get sick on the way and have to stop like 10 or 5 minutes from our destination, right? And it's miserable when we get out of the car. It's still joyful to drive, and it's even more joyful when you're out in the sun on your nice bald head, right? Enjoying the wind and, driving on the highway and just cruising and, doing whatever. It's reliably joyful for me. I'm a little bit afraid to get rid of the car now. It's like, no, it's enchanted. I must keep it forever. It's like, no.
Don't be possessed, Mark. Don't let the car possess
I know. It's a struggle. It is a BMW 280i convertible. I did not intend to buy a BMW. I only intended to buy a convertible. And while I was where I was before I got back home, I looked up in Car and Driver, and it basically said, for the money I was willing to spend, I really wanted an Audi A5 convertible, but they're like 60 grand. So if you want a $40,000 convertible as opposed to a $30,000 or $20,000 convertible that will break, the according to Car and Driver, the 280i is the way to go, and I
Part of-
can concur. It is.
Part of the magic is probably also living in the South, where you know you don't have ice, you don't have big piles of snow. You can
I mean,
put the top down.
I had convertibles in New England. I got hooked on them early. Like people talk about drugs. It's like, no, convertibles. What do you mean cocaine and heroin? What are you talking
I'm just
about?
saying, Mark, I wouldn't drive your car in Fargo, not in the winter. Summer'd be fine. But I had a hard time seeing over the snowbanks of my little SUV.
I would drive my convertibles in 30-degree weather. I'd just have coats on, and I would put the top down and go for it. I did not care. I also had a higher tolerance for cold back then. But yeah, I mean, the thing that makes the real part of the real difference is the traffic, because I found out the reason why I stopped liking driving in New England was because the traffic had all changed and it was crappy. And once I got down here and the thing they call traffic is so laughably not traffic, I was like, oh, I love to drive. It's fantastic.
Oh my. Yeah, no, that convertible, that's the place where it all comes together for you.
Yeah.
It all just resonates with the engine that goes vroom vroom.
The quiet engine that you can't even feel it. Eight speed automatic. You can't even feel it shift. It's amazing.
Your heavenly chariot.
Yeah.
I'm all in. I'm all like, yes, can confirm.
Amazing.
But it is that ability to interface with quality. And what the thing that kills the ability to interface with quality is the dualism. It is that, we must have opponents in our head. It must be a battle between the ego and the id and the self, and that just kills quality, right? Because it's a fight, it's a war. And we aren't warring with ourselves internally, right? All the battles we have are with the external forces that are pulling us to darkness, right? And all we have to do is free ourselves from that, and the light, it's already there. Like the sun rises every morning in the east. You don't have to do anything. You just have to appreciate it. You just have to notice, right? It's just attention.
Well, that's interesting, Mark. This is something else I've been thinking about for a while. So I was talking with another friend of mine, and he was talking. He'd done this assessment thing. It was like spiritual pathways assessment, which he thought was pretty funny. But it was like we're kind of talking about sort of like the meta level of it, and it was like these things that make you feel closer to God, and we're kind of trying to analyze like what does it mean of what value is feel closer to God? Is that what we're showing? And a very related thing to that was I was thinking about. Okay, so one of those, the reason this connects, one of those is nature, is nature as a way to connect with God. And it's very easy. I have a tendency to have, let's say, strong emotional experiences when I'm out in the natural world. Like it's very easy for me to be super engaged and like connected with it, and like on all sorts of levels, intellectual and emotional and spiritual on all those levels. And like, so I can really like people, which is interesting. Anyway, we can leave that aside. But I was thinking about that. And so it opens you up to just how much glory there is in the world. And so, an easy example is like trees in the fall. I was talking about or another friend was showing me some pictures from in the Rockies. And there's, they're out hiking, and there's this granite crag that like comes down to this roaring stream, and there's, moss and beautiful young fir trees on it. It looks like a bonsai garden come to life. There's just this like degree of glory to that rock with those trees there. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, if I could really appreciate that, it should make me happy for my entire life. Like there's enough joy, there's enough beauty in there that I could just feed on. I should be able to feed on that for my whole life. Likewise, like that memory that I have of last fall of, that one particular oak tree, just like radiant, and on and on and on, my son's face, any of these things. And I think about that. And then I think about the fact that, and that's really tough. And I think like I love one of the reasons I love like writer Walker Percy is I feel like he's just willing to like smash that head on, and and it's related. I think it's related to reciprocal narrowing. I'm not sure. I don't know, but like related to that, you know, I go and I work heavy equipment. I've been doing more stuff like in residential areas with heavy equipment operation, and so I'm like in these places where they've got like $750,000 houses on like an immaculate 2 acres, and like, I mean, it's just like a chateau, and they're like, and now we're putting in the 3-story pool house, and you're like, okay, but you're not like radiantly transcendently happy all the time, and it's a different thing. That's like possession, but like this is what I'm saying is like there's this thing that's like I can open myself up to the outside world in that way and just be like deeply, profoundly appreciative and moved. And then as Walker Percy says, basically like, how do you get through 4 in the afternoon on Thursday?
Right.
It's like there's this like it's T.S. Eliot's, you know, man cannot bear too much reality. I go out and I can have these, you know, ecstatic experiences out in nature and just be like overwhelmed by the beauty and the unity and the goodness of it, and then I get worn out.
Well, yeah, but,
like,
right, but that is the
tough.
thing. You can't
tough.
stay there. You can't stay
Yeah.
in any of these places because life is
That's
movement.
a huge problem.
No, it's not a problem.
Well,
It's a pattern. It's a perennial pattern. You can't stay anywhere because then you're not alive anymore. So you have to keep, and that stuff isn't there, right? Like the radiant
Yes.
oak tree
Yeah.
doesn't look the same at midnight. Like it's not still
Sure.
there, and you know that.
Yeah. Well, so here's the question then, because in that you say there's movement, and I just wonder, well, where's that movement necessary? Because like I can look at the world and I can see there's all sorts of movement, and I think we've talked a little bit about like the distinction between novelty and variety, right? That we pursue novelty because we can't appreciate variety, and that variety is baked into lived experience. Like you grow and you meet different people, and the seasons change and things get bigger and smaller and so on and so forth. And there's the day-night cycle and the moving of the stars and all that. So there's definitely variety. But I'm just wondering, but I guess there's a part of me that doesn't accept that like that place of existing in, say, a state of whatever that is, that has to be one of those things that moves. That's the thing that's weird, because I would also say that almost everyone in the world believes that you could get there and stay there, and they live their entire life based on that. And so then I think, well, is that just like a profoundly maladaptive? Is everyone completely mistaken about that?
No, that's idolatry. No, that's idolatry. That's when you think there's a goal or an end state, right? But the bottom line is it's not novelty variety. It's novelty nostalgia variety. And variety, it's so funny. I did a video on this and it didn't record, but I did one for my personal channel where I was going to talk about variance. Variety is variance. That's what it is. Technically, it reduces to variance. So you need all three of those aspects. You need a newness aspect, the novelty, right? You need the nostalgic aspect, the things you know, that's contrast. And then you need variety for the moving contrast between those two things, right? And I think a lot of cultural collapse is just we have too many extremes, right? The extremes are way further than they've ever been before, right? And so the amount of variation in the world has increased. And what that does is it drowns out order. And so there's more noise than signal. In other words, the signals that we have, it's not that the ordered signals aren't there, it's that we're not paying attention to them anymore. And that's why you're convincing me now to with all these questions that I'm going to cover attention on Friday's live stream, because now it's really coming up a lot. It came up in a couple of other contexts already since Friday, so which is crazy, but these things are always crazy. And
crazy.
And, yeah, it is.
If by crazy you mean providential, then yes.
Yeah. Yes. Right. But it's all about contrast. We need contrast to see. And contrast isn't black and white. It's not that simple. If you do photography or anything, you'll realize pretty quickly, it's not the total amount of light. It's actually the difference in light from different angles. Right. And, I can demonstrate that. It's not the total amount of light, because I can increase the total amount of light all day long right now. And that doesn't work. Right. It's the contrast between the three lights because I got one
Yeah.
above me, right? And that's what changes
Yeah.
the colors. So it's a multivariate equation, and people don't like that. They want a scientific, materialist, linear, discrete answer: A to B. Here's the
But
algorithm, the
even
relationship.
in terms of, let's say, goodness is, you're talking about like variance, novelty, and variance, novelty, and what's the last one we were talking about?
Nostalgia.
Variance, novelty, and variation. No, and nostalgia. There we go. Great.
Nostalgia.
But there's some, like, it's not just those three things. It's like some particular pattern of those three things that's like, that feeds you, right? And so there's a sort of like, I don't want to say thing above that, but there's a way to look at that and say,
intelligibility.
okay. Well, but you can have things that meet all those criteria, like, say, numerical patterns that are not life-giving, right? So it's intelligible, it's got variety in it, and there's this little bit of like a
No,
interesting.
Some
They
people-
that was
don't.
interesting.
They don't. They don't move. They don't have life because they don't move.
Okay, but you're even in that, like, I don't know. This is just interesting to me because I think, well, you have to get at some reason. The thing is, you have to get at some reason why that doesn't work long term. Like, you would recognize there being like dysfunction in someone, right? So they could have some sort of pattern of like, they're happy sometimes, like the drug user, and then they crash, and like there's something wrong with that,
Right.
right? There's like something past just like this, and
Yeah,
so
it's time. It's right. It's something past it. Right. When you add time,
sure.
that's the
Sure.
contrast to the pattern. And then the pattern becomes clear. Is it an up and down pattern, or is it a reciprocally opening pattern, or reciprocally narrow? Because drugs are a reciprocally narrowing pattern of addiction. That's what they are. They aren't anything else. They can't manifest anything else, right? Ultimately. Now, you can use drugs very wisely, very carefully, but only certain ones, right? To be, to be in an enhanced state, and that's okay to some extent. Although I would say cocaine is, never okay. It's too strong. Heroin's too strong, right? There are certain ones that are too strong. In the same way that, if you engage with psychedelics, the odds that you'll become a schizophrenic are high. The number one cause of schizophrenia is drug use, psychedelic drug use. They always leave that out somehow when they're talking about drugs. I don't know why. So it is that contrast with time. So yeah, you can set a time limit, like, and this is the scientific method. This is explicitly science has to set a time limit. Otherwise, everything is rusting all the time, right? Rust is inevitable, sure. But how do we define rust? We take a time frame, we take a material type, then the variance is humidity or something usually, right? And that's all you need, right? And then you can define rust. But you need all of those variables locked down. Why? Because if you continue it through time, none of science works because everything goes to dust. I'm pretty sure that's in that famous book you guys keep reading and telling me about. But yeah, it's all there.
Coffee's good though, right?
No,
not
Sally
too
knows what I'm going to say to that. This is her trolling at this point.
But it helps her do stuff. Is
Yes.
it doing stuff good?
This is Sally. That's all of Sally right there. Like, that's her whole ethos. She's so narrowed in on doing stuff in coffee. It's like, and then she'll probably talk about lists. You need the coffee to make the list, to do the stuff. Doing stuff is good. That's her whole. That's all of Sally. If you wanted to make Sally an algorithm, that's the algorithm for Sally. Now, obviously, I'm being absurd, right? But yeah, you can't use the Sally algorithm and get another Sally. It's not going to work.
Oh,
Doing the right
Well-
thing at the right time is good.
bubble this. Instant coffee? Oh, we need to put a fund together to get Bubble this some decent coffee.
Heretic.
And cigarettes with an
Heresy,
S.
Father Eric. Excommunicate him.
You know what's funny is, speaking of nostalgia, I have mad nostalgia for instant Nescafe instant coffee from when I was living in South America. You'd think, like, here in the land of coffee beans, this is going to be great, and then everywhere, just like Nescafe instant coffee, and then you, like, the weird thing is you habituate to stuff like that. You're like, oh, I love this. This is my thing. I drink like bad diner coffee. I'm like, oh yes. Like there's something about bad diner coffee with like a slug of creamer in it or something where you're like, this is somehow it's fitting. It's fitting that the situation raises the coffee to a new level, to a level of it transcends itself. It's like it's a bad cup of coffee, but
It's high
somehow now it's good.
contrast. It's high contrasting all the rest of the experience that's excellent. That's what it is. And that contrast item helps to remind you, because it's the most salient thing, is actually the negative case. Like evolutionarily. That's why.
What's so funny, Mark, is that I can have crappy coffee somewhere in a situation not like that, and the memory of the bad coffee,
Right,
it makes me happy.
Yeah, you remember the contrasting memory. Yeah, that's absolutely how memory works. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah, it's so funny, right? Because you develop an appreciation not only for the nostalgia, but for the fact that that's still available to you to engage in.
Speaking of engaging in things, how you doing, Bruce?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing all right. Better for your asking. We're solving everything here, as we do every Sunday night.
Oh, excellent! Such a great
Yeah.
use of the Sabbath.
But I don't know. I don't know if you're gonna like this, but we solved the reality problem with the traditional Latin Mass.
Oh, the TLM.
Yes, the old TLM.
Oh,
we
that's
think-
great. Okay,
figured
well,
out if
what's
you
what's that?
Well, basically, if you go to an abbey in the middle of Oklahoma, and you have eyes to see, then you'll notice that beautiful churches are just reality concentrated, and then you go out into the world and you can actually see reality properly.
Yes.
That was a really bad summary. I'm sorry about that.
So beautiful churches are are reality. So
Well, they're
all
like a
of reality
concentrated.
concentrated into one locale.
Yeah, and then you can go out there and see the bits floating around. But because you saw the miniaturized versions, the bigger bits, they make sense.
Well, they're not just miniaturized, they're contrasted. Like when you go to a Greek Orthodox church and you look around, everything is bright lines and it's
Yeah, no
shiny
disagreement there. There's a significant aesthetic that people experience and enjoy in many of these institutions. That includes Catholicism, TLM, Greek, Antiochian, etc. In fact, I'd argue there are aesthetics that exist in churches that meet only outdoors in the woods.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't find them entirely useful. Because the thing that makes church worthy of attendance is that it can be experienced by even the blind, deaf, dumb, mute, and smellless man.
I mean, without that, you don't have the contrast, so you couldn't see the church at all. But
Oh, I would disagree.
infusing it for
You
the
see
lower
it.
level is a flattening, in my opinion.
Well, flattening as it is, I don't have a problem with flattening something as far as ultimate concern is concerned.
You're
you know.
reducing it. You're reducing it to the minimum possible level, right?
Which I think is useful as far as application goes.
Yeah, that's where we, as you know, that's where we disagree on all points. Like every time we get to a point where you do that, I go, nope. Yeah,
Oh, that's
On
all I'm into.
subjects.
I'm
Yeah.
glad
Yeah.
you guys
That's
are
actually the
disagreeing
common-
efficiently.
Common theme.
True, that's true. Yeah, but that is an interesting observation, though. I think that you have this concentrated reality in such an institution like that, or a building. I actually saw someone post an interesting in this Slack group I'm in with a bunch of Orthodox folks. They said that art, or architecture, or art, is music frozen in time, which I thought was an excellent example of that sort of idea, because they posted a picture of I want to say it was Notre Dame, but if it wasn't Notre Dame, it was a very similar cathedral. And so they had this sort of the spires, right, and all of the angles are very distinctly carved, but you have a giant building with those distinctions. And so they kind of compared it to a masterpiece symphony with harmony, right? So you have the broad symphony, but you have the interplay of the harmony, which I thought was interesting.
That's an excellent way of putting it.
Yeah, it was
There's the
good.
architecture student.
Yeah. Well, and it is like, and this is, and again, that to me would be a reduction, right? Where you're making an equivalence, which is a good one, right? But it's an analogy, right? There's an aspect to music because it's not frozen in time that can't be captured in the building, right? And at the same time, doing that makes the music sound better acoustically if it's done properly, right? So it's like, oh, that's weird. And you can look at that again and go, well, that's a paradox. And I would say, no, if you think that's a paradox, you're forgetting that time exists and that movement matters. Like, in fact, that's the only thing that this is one of the cases you could make for the axiomatic statement that being is good, right? And it's why the Gnostics use emergence is good as their core axiom and not being is good, right? Because they see that conflict, that challenge, that quote paradox that isn't a paradox, and they say, things that move are good. It's like, no, because that's not the same as being, and being is enchanted, whereas movement is not necessarily enchanted.
Alrighty. Bruce, you want to take a question?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't shy away from questions.
How does the blind, mute, deaf person come to Jesus without reading the Bible, according to Bruce? This is the Tommy problem, because Tommy doesn't know what day it is. He doesn't know who Jesus was or what praying is. How can
there are two
he
answers
be
to this.
saved?
There are two answers to this. The one answer is it doesn't matter because God is in control. And if he decides that certain people are destined to not be saved because they're deaf as a part of the fall, then that is his decree. The other answer is when one's heart is quickened, they experience a significant change with whatever senses they possess. Both of them require God to act.
When the heart is quickened?
It's a Baptist thing. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
Born
And the
again.
Mormon-
When
and
one
the
is
Mormon
born
thing.
again. Yeah, when one is born again. Well, there's a third, which is the decree is already laid, and therefore their coming to Jesus will happen in some time. Whether
How
that's
does one become
Yeah.
born again?
Baptism.
But
You
did you
get
say
incorporated
baptism
into
or
Christ via
generation?
baptism. Yeah.
No, can't
you
That's
just
the
say-
Catholic answer.
Can't you just tell Jesus you're a sinner and ask him to save your soul and you're in? Isn't that? I learned
Yeah, but
that
how do you do
somewhere.
that if you're deaf?
True conviction. It's
I mean,
it's
no,
it's
that-
baptism of the heart and circumcision of the heart, not externally. So, therefore,
How
Alrighty.
can you even?
Gentlemen, I have a very early morning. As much as I love these old Southern Baptist waters that I've tread many years, y'all have a great week.
See you,
Good to
Ted.
see you, Ted.
Southern
Thanks for hopping
Baptist.
on. Delightful as always.
oh, I see. I'm the Southern Baptist. I see. I'm not though, but okay.
Yeah, you're like, what was it, Reformed Baptist?
Yeah. Although there are some Reformed Baptists in the Southern Baptist Convention, most Southern Baptists today, I would probably not share much at all with. So there's that.
Okay.
Yeah, except from the outside where you share almost everything. Yeah. I love how we don't share it. It's like, yeah, it's all 99.9% the same. And you're just arguing over a 0.1% theology discussion.
Well, it's entirely foolishness to the world. I agree with you there. So from the outside, that may be true. But from the outside, in many cases, Father Eric and I look the same to many, with very small distinctions.
I should hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's something very wrong with this thing that we've labeled Christianity. That is
Right.
still my point.
Well, there's,
Still.
yeah. And well, to be fair, the Catholics and I have a very similar tradition as far as the genesis of it goes in the West.
Why
What's
don't you
that?
expound on that? Because I'm curious now.
For instance, our doctrinal statements, right? Catechisms, very specific confessional theology,
Okay.
very specific Western based Christianity is very similar. In fact, there were people making the same distinctions that reformers were making in the 1300s that still considered themselves Catholic. And because we held to so many of the same tenets, largely. So the traditions were shared. And actually, I think many of them remain. There just was a massive reforming of those things that were distinctions, But
Yeah, as one does.
sure, yeah. But I mean, when you're talking about like today's modern Big Eva or the polar opposite Russian Orthodox, you and I would be much more closely aligned than I to those two.
Sure. Yeah.
Modern Big Eva has an easy believism aspect that I don't believe in.
Mhm.
And I know Catholicism doesn't. And Eastern Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy, has a very mysterious, uncodified set of traditions that they hold to. And I wouldn't agree with that either. So that's where we share a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I am quite a bit more codified than the Russians. I don't know. I actually look at a lot of the Orthodox traditions, and I look at the respect they have for their traditions, and I'm like, oh, we got to get back to that because all of this stuff we've been doing since the 70s, where we're just kind of making stuff up, it's very clearly not working.
Yeah.
So,
I this is where we depart.
that's what I was
Because
going to think.
I have the
part
traditions,
there.
in Colossians, Paul just discusses the traditions of men, and I'm not too, I don't think the Bible ever speaks too kindly of the traditions of men. So then we'd have to state whether or not these are traditions of men or are they divine.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
then we'd
I
have
do
to
un-
come
I-
up with a criterion for distinguishing between the traditions of men and divine institutions. And
Mhm.
golly, that sounds like an awful lot of work right
It
there.
is a lot of work right now, this hour. I would say one thing that's true is there is a massive search for ancient roots. You ever read that book?
The Bible, the massive search
no,
for ancient
no.
roots.
It's called The Search for Ancient Roots. It's a book.
No,
I
no,
see
that was
that.
probably
I
just
see
my
that
early
one.
20s.
Oh, I see. No, it's good. I like it. Examines sort of how can I say this? A search for identification with something that has been lost in much of the modern traditions, right? As it were.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't comment on other people. My basic experience was that the closer I got to the more ancient form of worship, the happier I got and the more satisfied I was with it.
Nostalgia is a very powerful emotion.
But I don't know how I could be nostalgic for something I've never actually experienced.
Right.
Well, it's not nostalgia in that well, my argument is that it's not experienced nostalgia because you once experienced it. It's the archetype that you're grasping toward.
Then it's not
What do you
nostalgia.
define as
It's not nostalgic in that case. It's similar. It's not entirely the same word.
No, it's not. It's something entirely different. It's like a reverence for that which has always worked. And why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it hasn't always worked though, because if that were true, we wouldn't be in the position we're in today.
No, that's not true. If you move away from that which has always worked, that's how you get in the position we're in today. And that's clear from Vatican II, for example. It's clear. Like there's a number of things you can point to where it's like,
Depends on where
yeah,
you
we're
draw the
just
line of today.
bored and we're looking for novelty. And then we overextend on the novelty. And the next thing you know, chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that you have. Well, okay. The question, I guess, would be where are we drawing the line as far as what is old, what is tradition, and how it makes you feel, and also like as far as I'm concerned, the heart is entirely deceitful. So what makes me feel good has no bearing on any truths or things I should or should not be doing. In fact,
Well,
if it feels good, it doesn't necessarily give me a truth claim.
Bruce, that's fine. But now
Yeah.
you've removed all ability to rationalize, which is also fine because I think rationality sucks. But
In a sense, I agree with you. In a sense, I do agree with
Right,
you in a certain
right,
sense.
but,
Yeah.
but then you've created problems that you can't ever resolve. So I would be a no on the creating problems that can't be resolved. Right?
No, I don't know that I'm creating them. I think I'm discovering the unresolvable. I'm not creating them.
No. I think the mistake that people make is they say, oh well, there are these old patterns that make. We'll pick on Father Eric because it's his stream, and he kicked me off if he doesn't like it.
That's fair.
You know, you can say, well, this makes me feel good, right? But the mistake he doesn't make is say, therefore, everybody should do this, right? Whereas you could say, look, there are older practices, and there are a number of them, and we can pick some arbitrary cutoff point, right? Like say where the church receded from society or where church attendance went down. And I would argue this happened around the same time, right? And I would say, okay, so we'll just say Vatican II. Right, and we don't have to blame the paperwork in Vatican II. We can blame the implementation, right? And we could say things that came before that are useful, and then all of them, because there's a bunch of conflicts there, right? Over time in the church, it's this changed and that changed. You say, yeah, but they're all on the table, and anything later than Vatican II should not supplant any of them. That's perfectly valid because then you're not universalizing. And I would argue that Father Eric would almost certainly not make that mistake. And that's because he was, at my house for a week and we had lots of discussions, and I'm fairly sure he understands the problem of universalization. And then when we propositionalize things and talk about them, we have to abstract them into a universal. There's no choice in language. You don't get the option. And then that's when we fall into idolatry, fall into this dogmatic thinking, fall into this universalization, right? Because we can't be careful enough. But I don't think that's fair. I think that traditional things that resonate with you for a reason. That doesn't mean they have to be universal for everybody, but the fact that they're old and have survived has value. That would be a Nassim Taleb's Lindy effect. Read all of Nassim Taleb's books. They're wonderful, right? And so there's a there for sure. Which also doesn't close the door on new things, but like let's first venerate the old things before we throw them out.
Sounds good to me.
Andrew's on board. Bruce
Do
is
it.
in deep thought.
Oh, I was waiting for Father Eric to respond. I didn't want to.
Well, yeah, I
jump on
mean,
the.
Yeah, I appreciate you blaming the implementation and not the paperwork, because Sacrosanctum Concilium is a very conservative document, with the exception of one sentence, which I would strike from the record if I had the ability. But I'm not an ecumenical council, so I can't do that. Yeah, and then I don't want to go forcing massive changes on the entire church. We did that once in 1970, and it was a disaster. So, like, let's try the whole welcoming people into something rather than smacking it into them.
Let's build people that can be welcomed into something first. See our video on Father Eric's channel, right?
Yes.
And then they'll come flooding, and you won't have to do any more work. But you do
That's
have
a
to do the
topic
work
I'd like
of
to
building the community in, so people can submit and then submit to something higher.
Yeah, I've definitely taken a different approach on the entirety of the things, and state that these large distinctions that are separating the wheat from the chaff and the sheep from the goats is a good thing. And so, in other words, if we have a number of goats coming into churches, or churches failing and dying because they were merely goats, that's great, because the faithful churches of sheep will shine and be a fragrant, pleasant aroma when the world is burning with all of the goats that are upset that their church no longer exists. And so there's a place where out of darkness comes light, and the sheep are a pleasant aroma that people will flock to.
That only works in Protestantism, though. It doesn't work in Orthodoxy and Catholicism.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to work today or yesterday for them. I don't see a pessimistic end to all things. In fact, I see the opposite. Many people think things have gotten worse for some measure since the fall. I actually disagree. I think that we've had massive improvements among many times, and there are some periods of difficulty, but improvement nonetheless.
Wait, let me see if I can sort out all of the Book of Revelation stuff. Is that pre-millennialism?
That's post.
Post-millennial. Oh. All I know is that.
But I'm not.
Catholic
I'm not
churches-
even getting into that particular. But I understand. Yeah, but that would be it would be post.
Post-millennialism.
Yeah. If you, I mean, that's very inside baseball for Mark.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that wasn't for Mark. That was for me.
Yeah. That's great. I love it. I think you're great, Father Eric.
Thank you.
Don't get my Reformed Baptist convictions wrong if you can.
You know, if I wasn't expecting to meet people, that I wouldn't put the StreamYard link out on YouTube.
That's an excellent point. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, same way. I totally agree. That's why my door is always open at my lounge, and there are people that come in all the time off the street, and it's fun. We need more Catholics, though. Not many of them come out. There's some version to cigars, it seems. I don't know.
You're in Maryland. How can there not be Catholics?
I know
everywhere?
you would think that there were, yeah, but where I am is actually Methodist land. To be fair,
Yeah, I know.
There's so many more Methodists than even Catholic.
No, I know.
churches, yeah.
I know exactly where you are, and that there are no Catholics there. So
There's-
yeah,
I think I can throw a dart and hit two within, I don't know, 60,000 people or something, maybe three. Not many. It's kind of a strange situation here. Although there is a very big for our area Catholic private school that people love. It's like it was one of the safe havens from public school for a while here before many others came. And many people still go. In fact, most people that I've met that go to St. Peter and Paul, which is the name of it, are not church attenders.
right.
There's some requirement for the children to be involved in some version of mass at some point, but there's
Right.
no requirement for the parents or anything like that.
Isn't that weird that these Catholic schools were so well known for their education, such that people who weren't Catholics were interested enough and willing to submit their children to potential Catholic doctrine just to get the good education? Isn't it weird that they tried to separate those things and it turns out that you can't?
Yeah, I mean, well, the entirety of the institutions in the United States for higher learning, especially in college, were created by Christian institutions. Christians. Period. From Oxford to Yale, from across the pond, even in Oxford. Yeah.
It's almost as though all the ordering in the universe was either created by Caesar or a god or something. Weird. I wonder if only somebody had written that down somewhere in a book a couple thousand years ago and we listened to it, maybe we'd be better off.
No disagreement there.
Yeah, there's something about I don't know. There's something about worshiping God that makes everything line up properly.
Well, I do agree with that. Are you, Eric? Father Eric? Where are you again?
North Dakota.
North Dakota. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so spring hasn't really shown up here yet. There's still piles of snow. It's pretty disgusting.
I never made it up there. Only through south. I didn't make it to north across. When I went
Yeah,
across the
well,
country.
do you love South Dakota but hate the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore? Then come to North Dakota.
Funny enough, I did not stop at Mount Rushmore the two times I went through. Actually, I know it seems silly, but I didn't. Is that a
You
flower?
can't see it. I got my roses
There's
out.
not enough contrast, Mark.
Yeah,
Do something
Yeah.
Not
about
enough
that.
contrast. Can't see without contrast. Yeah, I got the roses out. They're blue.
Are you in
all
a
over.
small town of North Dakota, like most of North Dakota
No,
has,
I'm
or a
in
large town?
Fargo, which is the biggest town,
Okay,
which isn't really that big in the grand scheme of things, but
big for North Dakota.
big for North Dakota. Yeah.
Okay.
But when we fill the Fargo Dome up, it becomes the sixth largest city in North Dakota.
Oh, the claim to fame of that place is the movie, right? That's about it. Yeah.
Yep. I've managed to go a full 4 months without putting anybody in a wood chipper. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
It seems like progress. That's what we call killing sin.
Mhm. You know, I've never even watched it.
Well, you're not missing out too much. You've
Yeah, I'm
you've heard enough.
Yeah,
It's very worldly.
yeah, yeah.
How long have you been in the priesthood?
Since 2020.
Oh
August of
wow,
2020.
so
And
relatively recent.
I got a COVID ordination. You can
What does
imagine
that
how
mean?
much it means that the cathedral was only like half full.
Same requirements, of course. I'm sure as everyone else, just faster.
Yeah. I I don't think the ceremony would have taken significantly shorter.
Okay,
Just yeah.
and that was in North Dakota.
Yeah, it was in North Dakota.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know, North Dakota was less bad in their COVID response, so we were able to do, you know, like first off, the government never shut any churches down, I don't think. Um, so that's two thumbs up for Governor Burgum there. Um,
Nice.
and you know, they would give us recommendations and those sorts of things. And so
Guidelines.
uh, yeah, so there was a few, well, they weren't even like major changes to the ceremony, just like options we didn't take. Um, but I became a priest and I'll survive. So
How have your superiors felt about the internet presence?
they are unaware.
Oh, okay.
We'll burn that bridge when we get to it.
Okay. Hey.
I mean, like, I don't know. Sometimes I get a dozen people watching this stream.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. I mean, hey, cross that bridge when you get there. It is a tool, though.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, if the bishop tells me to stop, I'll just stop. Go to bed early on Sundays. That won't, I won't be happy about it, but
So do
just-
you host a live stream post mass every Sunday?
Yeah, it would be earlier if we didn't have a 6 p.m. mass.
Okay, so you have evening and morning, and Saturday.
So Sundays we have 4, 7:30, 9, 11, and 6 p.m.
That's impressive for Fargo. Wow.
Yeah.
Or do you just hold them even if no one shows? That's standard for you.
Well, sometimes I've never had a scheduled mass that nobody showed up for. On a weekday mass during a massive blizzard, I had one guy show up.
Okay.
And my boss was like, "Should we have mass? Should we cancel?" Like, I'll put on my snow pants and trudge over there. Somebody's gonna
Good
show
for
up.
you. Good for you. I like that.
And somebody did. So we had mass, just the two of us. But we get pretty good
Makes-
attendance.
That's
It
good.
drops down in the summer because everybody goes to their lakes in the summer.
hmm Yeah, that's pretty common for many churches, right?
Yeah.
So the homily must be very interesting on one person. Sort of
I
a
didn't
conversation.
preach that day.
Oh, I
didn't
see.
preach that
Okay, okay.
I'm just like, Larry, you're going to be just fine. You came here in a snowstorm.
So we got the Eucharist, we got the prayers, we got a couple of songs. The order of the Mass goes through, and he's good.
He's good. For
Okay.
daily masses, we usually don't do music. We do low masses.
Oh, okay.
Same here.
We're not like the Orthodox. We invented a low mass where you didn't have to chant absolutely everything.
Yeah, you don't say Theotokos 32 times a minute like they do.
Yeah, or anathema 700 times, whatever it is.
But he
Yeah,
still does mass. Says mass and holds a mass on vacation, which is just weird. By himself, even he doesn't need attendees.
Oh, I
So
see what you
did
mean.
my- I did
Yeah.
attend in my living room. It's quite nice. My cousin hates me now, but that's okay.
It must have made for an interesting experience with all the incense in your home.
No, look, the amount of incense that he used was nothing compared to what I would use if I were buying incense again. But B, absolutely nothing compared to the Orthodox Church, man. Those guys are like, they've got like, I don't know what it is. It's like an incense flamethrower, and they just, and they're just like, you can't see anything. It's, they go nuts with that stuff.
hmm I can answer Lynn's question for Father Eric, and the answer is no, right?
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Unless unless you're an Orthodox Christian, member of the Assyrian Church of the East, or the Polish National Catholic Church.
Yeah.
We would give them communion, but their bishops tell them not to take communion from us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and I urge you to respect the authority of
your
the people
bishop.
that you've placed yourself under.
Right. Your shepherds tell you. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It would raise the question as to why one would decide to take it if they're shepherd or bishops or
Which
spiritual fathers had told them
which
not to.
authority is more important to you?
Yeah. Well, that is the ultimate question.
yes, anybody can pray the rosary. Anybody can pray the rosary. It's just the whole communion thing. We got the guardrails around that, but Stations of the
Yeah.
Cross, the Rosary,
Fenced.
Divine Mercy chaplets, processions, anybody can join into those.
Yeah. We fence the table too
I think you
under
should.
different reasons. Yeah, I agree.
I don't get this whole open table thing. Like I went to the Thunder Bay conference, and so I went to a Catholic church first.
Well, I can make a case for it for open
Yeah.
table.
Well, it was just I'd never been to a Eucharistic Protestant liturgy before Thunder Bay.
Eucharistic Protestant? That's interesting.
Well, I mean,
You
one
mean
where they
like a
shared
Protestant
communion.
with the communion? Oh, I see.
Yeah, Protestant with communion.
With the
Protestant
ordinances.
with
Yeah, the
communion.
Lord's
Yeah,
Supper.
yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
I'd been to a Protestant wedding, and that was
Mhm.
fine. It was a Missouri Synod Lutheran, and so I kind of felt at home. The guy was dressed up properly.
Lutherans are very
Yeah.
somewhat similar feeling.
But then when they served communion in plastic dishes, I was like, oh, you couldn't pay me to take that.
Yeah, I hold a memorial version of the supper like Zwingli, right? But I also have a for me it's more of a let's put our best foot forward when we do things, and that doesn't feel like our best foot forward sometimes. You know, I'm a big fan of having things well prepared when you do things, but when it's memorial, you know, that's where they are, right? So if it's a memorial, they're, you know, they have have you seen those the COVID sort of things that people started doing, which was this very weird it's a cup with 2 layers and pieces of plastic.
I think that's what they were doing.
Was it that? Okay. Yeah, it's really strange.
No. It was these little shot glasses. That's what it was. Yeah.
Plastic
Yeah.
shot glasses.
Oh, they're plastic chocolate, but they're okay. Yeah. Well, you know, some
Oh,
Protestants have, you know,
It was
glass
disgusting
ones.
is what it was. But yeah.
Well, you know, I've even been a part of Methodist services where they have the chalice, and they just dip as opposed to drink like the Catholics would. So there's in a couple of different Methodist churches I've been to, they have a giant, wonderful loaf of bread that's baked. It's very Amish style, and you pull a huge chunk off or a small one, and that's actually kind of a funny bit. But anyway, which size do you grab? You know, so you grab it a piece and you dip it into the chalice, and everyone uses the same chalice. And then you
That's
just
called
have, you know.
intinction.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a name for it. And
okay,
it is an
yeah.
option in Catholic world.
Yeah, I've seen that somewhere else too. That makes sense
Yeah.
now. That
But then if people actually want to receive intinction, they have to receive on the tongue, which would be super easy to implement if we hadn't gone through 1970, you know, because everybody'd be receiving on the tongue anyway.
I have no problem with doing. You know, in fairness, I kind of would like everyone to just drink out of the cup.
Mhm.
Why not? I mean, but also I feel as though we need a feast after every communion as well. That's my biblical conviction. And when we do it at our church, that's what we do. So every day that we have communion, which is in this case monthly, not daily or weekly rather, it incorporates a giant meal as a part of the post church service. So I think that's the proper ordinance, but you know.
Yeah. What about coffee and donuts? Would that get you there?
Oh, you mean as far as like, could we use coffee and donuts for the Eucharist?
No. After the Eucharist, if you just did coffee and donuts for your meal, I would not imagine that you would be a coffee and donuts for communion kind of guy. I don't want to signal that kind of disrespect.
I actually, yeah. Well, if you can talk about that, but I don't. No, I mean, I think ideally it's a real big meal, like a seder would be, and it's, you do however you can do it with the resources you have, which is usually some sort of potluck. But if you're gonna do it, share a meal.
Mhm.
That's how I see it. This sort of like version of the meal that we've instituted from church tradition, I think is less than ideal, but convenient, and that convenience tends to win in many of the early church history. If you read some of that, so that's how I see it. But I would rather people eat a massive meal together and not just dip, a shot glass and a little bit of cracker.
Yeah, yeah. At our big liturgies, we could usually get a good banquet going. So we still had the ordination lunch when I was ordained in the basement. That just felt right.
I totally agree.
Lynn is asking, do Catholics do foot washing on Holy Thursday? We wash 12 people's feet in an optional rite after the homily. So that is something that we do practice most places once a year.
Okay.
Because Lynn
Most
wanted to know.
places,
Yeah, that's interesting.
it's optional.
I
It is
agree with
optional.
Jordan. Memorial or not, Jesus is king. Yes and amen.
We can all get behind that.
Yeah. All of Christ for all of life.
Repent, Mark.
There is not one square corner of the earth that Jesus doesn't cry, mine.
Lots of presumption there, Father Eric. I'll forgive it, but careful.
Oh, well, Bruce, it's been delightful to have you on.
Yeah,
But,
thanks for having me on. I wish I were in my lounge. I would show you. I have this. I think you'd like some of the imagery. I have a couple of Catholic paintings and crucifixes on the wall. It's an
Interesting.
ecumenical lounge.
Interesting. The ecumenical lounge. Well, maybe someday I'll be able to stop by in person.
You are invited if you're ever on the East Coast. If you want to come, no pressure to smoke cigars, but if you want to, you might take the
I
collar
tried
off
the
when you do
cigars,
so.
and I thought they were okay. I just didn't think they were worth the cost.
I'll give you one for free.
No, that's not the only cost there is.
Oh, I see the other cost.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
there are other costs. So I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it enough to. I'll have beer or whiskey or something. So
We have a lot of that too, man. We have a lot of
Alrighty.
whiskey here, but thanks for having me.
yeah. Thanks for coming on. It's been good. Happy Sunday, everybody, and God bless you all.
Thank you. You as well.
Bless you as well.